I never imagined a lie could save my life. Ethan Brooks stood in that rain-soaked cafe, pretending to be someone he wasn't, about to meet a woman meant for his brother. One conversation, one honest mistake. But sometimes the wrong person walks through the door at exactly the right moment, and everything you thought you knew about second chances shatters like glass. This is the story of a single father who stopped believing in love, a woman tired of empty perfection, and the blind date that should never have happened. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The alarm clock screamed at 4:17 a.m., 3 minutes before it was supposed to, but Ethan Brooks was already awake. He'd been staring at the ceiling for the better part of an hour, watching shadows shift across the water-stained plaster, listening to the radiator clank and hiss in the corner of his cramped bedroom. Sleep had become a stranger these past 3 years. A visitor that occasionally knocked, but rarely stayed long enough to matter. He threw off the thin comforter and sat up, his bare feet touching the cold hardwood floor. The apartment was silent except for the ambient noise of the city waking up outside his window. Garbage trucks groaning down narrow streets, early morning commuters honking impatiently, the distant wail of a siren cutting through the pre-dawn darkness. Ethan moved through his morning routine with the precision of a man who'd done this 1,000 times before. Shower, shave. The same jeans he'd worn yesterday, pulled from the chair where he'd draped them, a clean white t-shirt from the drawer, his father's old watch, the leather band cracked and faded but still keeping perfect time. Every movement was automatic, muscle memory taking over where conscious thought had long since given up. By 4:45 he was downstairs in the bakery, flipping switches and bringing the small shop to life. The overhead lights flickered twice before humming to steady brightness, illuminating the worn wooden counter, the glass display cases that needed a good cleaning, and the chalkboard menu on the wall where his handwriting had become progressively worse over the years. Brooks Family Bakery. His grandfather had started it in 1962. His father had run it until the heart attack in 2019. Now it was Ethan's, along with everything else that came with being the responsible son, the one who stayed, the one who showed up. The commercial oven took 20 minutes to preheat. While he waited, Ethan pulled out his mise en place, a term he'd learned from a YouTube video because he'd never had formal training, just hands-on experience and his father's gruff instructions shouted over the noise of industrial mixers. Flour, sugar, butter, eggs, yeast, salt. The ingredients were simple. The work was not. He started with the sourdough, his hands working the dough with a rhythm that required no thought. Push, fold, turn, push, fold, turn. The repetitive motion was meditative, one of the few times during his day when his mind could actually quiet down, when the constant background noise of worry and responsibility dimmed to a manageable hum. The dough was sticky and resistant at first, but gradually it transformed under his palms, becoming smooth and elastic, developing that perfect tension that meant it was ready for its first proof. He shaped it, placed it in the banneton basket, covered it with a clean towel, and set it aside. Next came the croissants. These were trickier, requiring precision and patience. The laminated dough needed to be kept cold, the butter layers distinct and even. Too warm, and the butter melted, ruining the flaky layers that made a croissant worth eating. Too cold, and the dough cracked, unable to be shaped properly. It was a delicate balance, and Ethan had ruined more batches than he cared to count before finally getting it right. By 6:30, the first loaves were in the oven, filling the bakery with that unmistakable aroma of baking bread, yeasty and warm, and somehow both comforting and heartbreaking at the same time. It was the smell of his childhood, of Sunday mornings when his father would let him help, of a time before everything got complicated. He heard the footsteps upstairs, light and quick, followed by the creak of the bathroom door. Oliver was awake. Ethan glanced at the clock. Right on schedule. His son was nothing if not consistent, a 6-year-old who treated his morning routine with the seriousness of a military operation. Ethan wiped the flour from his hands and headed for the stairs that connected the bakery to their apartment above. The steps were narrow and steep, the railing loose despite his repeated promises to fix it. The apartment door was never locked. What was the point when you lived directly above your business? "Morning, buddy," Ethan called as he entered the small kitchen. Oliver appeared in the doorway, his dark hair sticking up in every direction, wearing his favorite dinosaur pajamas that were getting too short in the legs. He was clutching Mr. Whiskers, the stuffed rabbit he'd had since he was 2, the one with the missing eye and the ear that had been sewn back on 3 different times. "Is it pancake day?" Oliver asked, his voice still thick with sleep. "Wednesday," Ethan said, opening the refrigerator. "Wednesdays are oatmeal." Oliver's face fell in that dramatic way only children could manage, as if he'd just been informed of a great tragedy. "But I don't like oatmeal." "You liked it fine last Wednesday." "Last Wednesday I was different." Despite everything, the exhaustion, the constant worry, the weight of responsibility that sat on his shoulders like a physical thing, Ethan felt himself smile. "Different how?" "Just different." Oliver climbed onto one of the kitchen chairs, setting Mr. Whiskers carefully on the table. "Can I have brown sugar in it?" "You can have brown sugar in it. And raisins?" "Don't push your luck, kid." While the oatmeal cooked on the stove, Ethan made coffee, strong and black, the only way he could drink it anymore. He'd used to take cream and sugar back when he'd had time for preferences. Now he drank it for function, not pleasure, something to pour caffeine into his system so he could make it through another 18-hour day. Oliver chattered while he ate, a running commentary on everything and nothing, a dream about flying squirrels, a kid at school who could burp the alphabet, a theory about whether dinosaurs would like pizza. Ethan listened with half his attention, making the appropriate sounds of interest while mentally running through his to-do list for the day. Restock the front counter. The almond croissants were selling better than expected. He needed to make more. Mrs. Chen wanted 3 loaves of rye for her book club on Friday. The espresso machine was making that noise again, the grinding sound that meant something expensive was about to break. He needed to call the repair guy, but the repair guy charged $200 just to show up, and $200 was the difference between paying the electric bill on time or 2 weeks late. "Dad, you're not listening." Ethan blinked, focusing back on his son. "Sorry, buddy." "What did you say?" "I said, can Tommy come over after school?" "Not today. I've got to do inventory after we close." Oliver's face fell again. "You always have to do something." The words hit harder than they should have, a direct strike to the constant guilt that Ethan carried around like a second skeleton. "I know. I'm sorry. Maybe this weekend?" "You said that last weekend." "This weekend, I mean it." Oliver looked at him with those serious dark eyes, his mother's eyes, though Ethan tried not to think about that. And Ethan could see the doubt there. His son was 6 years old and already learning that adult promises didn't always mean what they were supposed to mean. "Finish your breakfast," Ethan said quietly. "We need to leave in 20 minutes." The morning rush started at 7. It wasn't much of a rush anymore, not like it used to be when his father ran the place, when there'd be a line out the door and people waiting for their regular orders. But there were still the faithful few. Mr. Patterson, who bought a plain bagel and black coffee every morning, reading his newspaper at the corner table for exactly 45 minutes before heading to his office. The Ramirez sisters, who split a cinnamon roll and gossiped in rapid Spanish. Young professionals grabbing pastries on their way to the subway, barely looking up from their phones as they paid. Ethan worked the counter while keeping an eye on the ovens, a complicated dance of customer service and baking that required him to be in 3 places at once. He'd gotten good at it, efficient, but it meant that conversations were brief and transactions were quick. There was no time for the leisurely chats his father used to have. The way he'd known everyone's names and their kids' names and what they did for a living. By 8:30, Oliver's backpack was packed, and they were walking the 4 blocks to Riverside Elementary. The morning was crisp, autumn finally asserting itself after a too warm September. Leaves were starting to turn, scattered across the sidewalk in shades of yellow and orange. Oliver jumped on every pile he could find, sending leaves flying, laughing when they caught in his hair. "Hold my hand when we cross the street," Ethan reminded him. "I know, Dad." But Oliver took his hand anyway, his small fingers wrapping around Ethan's calloused palm, and for just a moment, everything else fell away, the worry, the debt, the exhaustion. And there was just this. His son's hand in his, the cool morning air, the sound of children laughing as they approached the school. "Have a good day, buddy." Ethan said when they reached the gate. You too, Dad. Oliver hesitated, then wrapped his arms around Ethan's waist in a quick hug before running off to join his friends. Ethan watched until Oliver disappeared through the school doors, a habit he couldn't seem to break even though he knew his son was safe, knew the teachers were good, knew that nothing bad was going to happen in the 7 hours until pickup. But still he watched, because watching was what fathers did, and he was determined to be good at the one thing that mattered most. The walk back to the bakery felt longer than the walk there. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Probably another past due notice, or maybe his brother calling to complain about something. Ethan ignored it. Whatever it was could wait until he'd had at least 2 more cups of coffee. The bakery was empty when he returned. The morning rush over, the lull before lunch settling in. He spent the next 2 hours on tasks that required his hands but not his mind, cleaning the display cases, restocking the shelves, prepping ingredients for tomorrow. The radio played classic rock at low volume, the DJ's voice a pleasant murmur between songs. At 11:15, his phone rang. His mother. Ethan considered letting it go to voicemail. Conversations with his mother lately had developed an unpleasant pattern of her asking how he was doing and him lying about being fine. But guilt won out over self-preservation. Hey, Mom. Ethan, sweetheart, how are you? Her voice was warm, concerned, with that edge of worry that had become permanent since his father died. Good. Busy. You know how it is. I do know. That's actually why I'm calling. She paused, and Ethan could hear the hesitation in the silence. I need to ask you for a favor. Ethan leaned against the counter, already feeling the weight of whatever was coming settle onto his shoulders. What kind of favor? It's about your brother. Of course it was. Daniel, the golden child. The successful one who'd gone to college and then law school and now worked at some fancy firm downtown, defending corporations against lawsuits and making more in a year than Ethan would make in 5. Daniel, who called once a month out of obligation and visited twice a year out of duty. What about him? He's sick, some kind of flu, I think. He's been in bed for 2 days. His mother's voice took on that particular tone she used when she was about to ask for something she knew was unreasonable. The thing is, he had plans today, an important meeting. Well, not exactly a meeting, more of a social obligation. Ethan closed his eyes. Mom, before you say no, just hear me out. Daniel was supposed to meet someone this afternoon. A blind date, actually. It was arranged through a friend of mine, Carolyn. You remember Carolyn? Her daughter works with this lovely young woman, and they thought Daniel might hit it off with her, and the whole thing has been planned for weeks. Mom, I can't go on Daniel's blind date for him. I'm not asking you to go on a date. I'm just asking you to show up and explain the situation. This poor woman has probably taken time off work, gotten herself all ready, and it would be terribly rude for Daniel to just not show up. You know how he is when he's sick. He won't answer his phone, won't text back. Someone needs to go and explain in person. Send her a message. Call the restaurant. There are about a dozen better solutions than sending me. Ethan, please. His mother's voice softened, took on that pleading quality that had worked on him since childhood. It's 1 hour of your time. Just go, apologize, explain that Daniel is ill, and offer to reschedule. That's all I'm asking. Don't make this poor woman sit there wondering if she's been stood up. Ethan looked around the empty bakery at the afternoon stretching ahead of him with its familiar rhythm of occasional customers and necessary tasks, and the slowly ticking clock until it was time to pick up Oliver. 1 hour. What difference would 1 hour make? What time and where? 2 o'clock, the Heritage Cafe on Madison. It's the one with the blue awning. She'll be wearing a red scarf. That was the identifier they agreed on. A red scarf. This sounds like a spy movie. It's just so they can recognize each other. Are you going to do it? Ethan sighed. Yeah, Mom, I'll do it. Thank you, sweetheart. You're a good son. Better than your brother deserves, honestly, but don't tell him I said that. After hanging up, Ethan stood in the quiet bakery and wondered how his life had become a series of obligations he never asked for. Take care of his father's business, raise his son alone, play courier for his brother's social life. Somewhere along the way, his own wants and needs had gotten lost in the shuffle, buried under the weight of everyone else's expectations. He flipped the door sign to "Back in 1 hour" at 1:45 and headed out into the afternoon. The Heritage Cafe was a 15-minute walk, through streets he knew by heart, past shops that had been there since he was a kid, and new developments that had sprung up like mushrooms after rain. The neighborhood was changing, gentrifying, rents going up while his customer base slowly dwindled. His father's bakery, which had once been the heart of the community, was becoming an anachronism, a relic from a time when people had time for small shops and personal service. The cafe was busy when he arrived, full of the laptop crowd, freelancers and remote workers nursing single cups of coffee for hours while they typed away at their screens. Ethan scanned the room and spotted her immediately. A woman sitting alone at a corner table, a red scarf draped over the back of her chair, checking her phone with the particular tension of someone waiting for a person who might not show up. She was pretty in an understated way, dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, minimal makeup, dressed in casual but expensive-looking clothes that suggested someone who had money but didn't feel the need to broadcast it. Late 20s, maybe early 30s. She looked tired, Ethan thought, or maybe just worried. He approached the table, his heart doing an uncomfortable thing in his chest. "Excuse me, are you waiting for Daniel Brooks?" She looked up, her expression shifting from hope to confusion. "Yes, are you—" "I'm his brother, Ethan." He pulled out the chair across from her. "Can I sit? This is going to sound strange." "Strange how?" But she gestured to the chair and Ethan sat. "Daniel's sick. He's been in bed with the flu for 2 days, and he's not really in a state to call anyone. My mother asked me to come and explain in person because apparently sending a text would be too rude." The woman stared at him for a moment, then laughed. A real laugh, genuine and surprised. "You're serious?" "Unfortunately." "So you came all the way here to tell me that I've been stood up, but politely?" "Basically, yes. And to offer to reschedule if you want. Though fair warning, my brother is kind of an idiot even when he's not sick, so I'm not sure why you'd want to." She laughed again, and some of the tension went out of her shoulders. "I'm Claire. Claire Morgan." "Nice to meet you, Claire. I'm sorry about all this." "Don't be. Honestly, I wasn't even sure I wanted to come. Blind dates are weird, right? You're meeting a complete stranger based on someone else's idea that you might be compatible, which makes no sense when you think about it. So why did you come?" Claire shrugged. "Same reason you're here, probably. Someone asked me to, and it seemed easier to say yes than to explain why I didn't want to." There was something refreshing about her honesty, about the way she didn't pretend to be disappointed or offended. Ethan found himself relaxing, the knot of tension between his shoulders loosening slightly. "Well, since we're both here and I've already walked 15 minutes, would you mind if I bought you a coffee, as an apology for my brother's lack of communication skills?" "You don't have to do that." "I know, but I'm going to feel guilty anyway if I just leave, and I've already got enough guilt in my life. So let me buy you a coffee, and we can sit here awkwardly for 20 minutes making small talk, and then we can both go back to our regular lives." Claire smiled, and it transformed her face, made her look younger and lighter and less tired. "Okay, but I'm buying my own coffee. You can keep me company while I drink it." They ordered at the counter, black coffee for him, some complicated latte with extra foam for her, and returned to the corner table. The cafe was loud, full of conversations and the hiss of the espresso machine and terrible indie music playing over the speakers. It should have been awkward sitting across from a stranger his brother was supposed to be meeting, but somehow it wasn't. "So what do you do?" Claire asked, "when you're not delivering bad news for your family?" "I run a bakery. My family's bakery, actually. My grandfather started it." "A baker." She said it like it was interesting, not with the vague disappointment people usually showed when they found out he didn't have a real career. Not by modern standards. "What kind of bakery?" "Traditional stuff, bread, pastries, some cakes. Nothing fancy." "Where is it?" He told her, described the corner location and the faded sign and the apartment above where he lived with his son. He hadn't meant to mention Oliver. That wasn't the kind of thing you dropped into a conversation with a stranger. But it slipped out naturally, and once it was out there, he couldn't take it back. "You have a son?" Claire's expression shifted, became more curious. "How old?" 6, Oliver. He's in 1st grade. "Is it just the two of you?" The question was gentle, but it still hit a nerve. "Yeah, just us. His mom left when he was 2. We haven't heard from her since." Claire didn't do the thing most people did. The sympathetic head tilt, the "I'm sorry," the awkward scrambling for something to say that wouldn't sound trite or meaningless. Instead, she just nodded, as if he'd told her something ordinary and unremarkable. That must be hard. Some days more than others, but we manage. He's a good kid. I'm sure he is. They talked for longer than 20 minutes. The afternoon shifted around them, the cafe crowd changing from the lunch rush to the mid-afternoon lull. Ethan found himself telling her about the bakery, about the struggle to keep it running, about how he'd never planned to be a baker but now couldn't imagine doing anything else. Claire told him about her job, something in marketing for a pharmaceutical company, the kind of corporate position that came with good benefits and soul-crushing meetings. I spend most of my day in conference rooms arguing about brand positioning, she said. It pays well, but sometimes I wonder if I'm doing anything that actually matters. At least you're not responsible for whether people have bread for their sandwiches. Is that how you think about it? The weight of sandwich making? Someone has to take it seriously. She smiled into her coffee cup. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? I don't know. Someone more like your brother, maybe. No offense. None taken. I'm nothing like my brother. He's successful and ambitious and completely terrified of actual responsibility. And you're not? Ethan thought about his life. The early mornings, the endless work, the weight of raising a child alone while trying to keep a failing business afloat. I'm terrified of responsibility too. I just don't have the luxury of avoiding it. Claire studied him across the table, her expression thoughtful. Can I ask you something? Sure. Are you happy? The question caught him off guard. When was the last time someone had asked him that? When was the last time he'd even thought about it? Happiness felt like such an abstract concept, something for people with time and energy and the freedom to pursue their own desires. I don't know, he said honestly. I'm content, I guess. I have my son. I have the bakery. It's not the life I planned, but it's the one I've got. That's not the same as being happy. No, Ethan agreed. It's not. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the weight of that admission hanging between them. Outside the cafe window, the afternoon light was starting to shift toward evening, golden and warm. Ethan glanced at his phone and realized with a start that it was nearly 4. He'd been here for 2 hours. I have to go, he said, standing abruptly. I need to pick up my son from school. Claire stood too, gathering her scarf in her bag. Of course, thank you for coming, and for being honest. It was nice. Better than a real blind date probably would have been. Yeah. Ethan hesitated, unsure how to end this strange encounter. Well, good luck with everything. I hope Daniel calls you when he's feeling better. I hope he doesn't, Claire said, and there was something in her voice that made Ethan look at her more closely. I'd rather he didn't. They walked out of the cafe together, stood on the sidewalk for an awkward moment, neither quite sure how to say goodbye. Finally, Claire smiled and turned to walk away, her red scarf trailing behind her like a flag. Ethan watched her go, then headed in the opposite direction toward the school. His mind was spinning, caught on the strangeness of the afternoon, on the conversation they'd had, on the way Claire had looked at him when she said she hoped Daniel wouldn't call. It didn't matter, he told himself. It was just a random encounter, a favor for his mother, an hour out of his routine. By tomorrow, he'd forget about it, about her, about the way she'd made him think about happiness, as if it were something he could actually choose. But when he picked up Oliver from school and listened to his son chatter about his day, when they walked home through the cooling afternoon and Oliver insisted on holding his hand at every crosswalk, Ethan found his thoughts drifting back to the cafe, to the woman in the red scarf, to the question she'd asked him. Are you happy? That night, after Oliver was asleep and the bakery was prepped for tomorrow, and Ethan was finally alone with his thoughts, he stood at his apartment window looking out at the city lights and admitted something to himself that he'd been avoiding for a long time. No, he wasn't happy. He was surviving, functioning, doing what needed to be done. But happiness? That was something other people got to have. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother. Thank you for today. The woman called Carolyn to say you were very sweet. I told her you were taken with your work and your son, but she seemed to think you made a good impression anyway. Ethan stared at the message, then typed back. It was fine. Tell Daniel to actually call her when he's better. His mother's response came quickly. I will. Though between you and me, I think she'd rather hear from you. Ethan didn't reply. Instead, he set his phone down and went to check on Oliver one more time before bed, a nightly ritual that brought him more peace than anything else in his carefully constructed life. His son was sprawled across his twin bed, Mr. Whiskers clutched in one arm, his face peaceful in sleep. This was enough, Ethan told himself. This had to be enough. But as he lay in his own bed, staring at the same water-stained ceiling, listening to the same radiator clanking in the corner, he couldn't stop thinking about dark hair and an honest laugh and the way a stranger had made him feel seen for the first time in years. It didn't mean anything, he told himself. It couldn't mean anything. Tomorrow would be the same as today. Early morning, flower on his hands, his son's hand in his at every crosswalk, the steady rhythm of a life built on routine and responsibility. Except something had shifted, some small thing he couldn't quite name. Like a door that had been closed for so long he'd forgotten it was there, and now someone had opened it just a crack, letting in a sliver of light. Ethan fell asleep thinking about coffee shops and red scarves and questions that didn't have easy answers, unaware that in a different part of the city, Claire Morgan was lying awake thinking about the same things, wondering why a substitute date with a tired baker had felt more real than anything she'd experienced in months. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor about these things. Sometimes the wrong person showed up at exactly the right moment. Sometimes a mistake was actually the beginning of something that made sense. But neither of them knew that yet. Not really. Not in any way they were ready to admit. For now, it was just a strange afternoon, a conversation that went on longer than it should have. Two people who'd briefly stepped outside their carefully ordered lives and found something unexpected in the space between intention and accident. The rest would come later, slowly, like bread rising, inevitable and transformative and impossible to rush. 3 days passed before Ethan saw her again, and when he did, he almost didn't recognize her without the red scarf. It was Monday morning, the bakery humming with its usual rhythm of early customers and the smell of fresh bread. Ethan was behind the counter, boxing up a dozen assorted pastries for Mrs. Chen, when the bell above the door chimed. He glanced up out of habit, the automatic smile already forming on his face, and froze. Claire stood in the doorway, looking uncertain in a way she hadn't at the cafe. She wore business clothes, a charcoal blazer over a cream blouse, tailored pants, heels that clicked against the old wooden floor as she stepped inside. Her hair was down today, falling past her shoulders, and she carried a leather bag that probably cost more than Ethan's monthly rent. Their eyes met across the bakery, and for a moment neither of them moved. "That'll be $18.50, Ethan said to Mrs. Chen, forcing himself to look away, to finish the transaction he'd started. Mrs. Chen counted out exact change, oblivious to the tension suddenly crackling in the small space. "Thank you, dear. These are for my book club. We're reading that new mystery everyone's talking about. Have you read it?" "No, ma'am. Not much time for reading these days." "You work too hard. A young man like you should have some fun once in a while." She patted his hand with her weathered fingers, gathered her box of pastries, and headed for the door. She passed Claire on her way out, giving her a curious glance. Then they were alone, or as alone as you could be in a bakery at 8:30 on a Monday morning, with the ovens roaring in the back and the espresso machine hissing and the radio playing something bluesy and melancholic. "Hi," Claire said. "Hi." Ethan wiped his hands on his apron, suddenly aware of the flour dusting his forearms, the sweat on his forehead from the heat of the ovens. "This is a surprise. I was in the neighborhood. I thought I'd stop by. See if the bread was as good as you made it sound." She approached the counter, her eyes scanning the display cases. "Though now that I'm here, I realize I don't actually know what I want." "What do you like?" "I don't know. What's good?" "Everything's good. I make it." She smiled at that, some of her uncertainty falling away. Confident. Honest. "I wouldn't sell it if it wasn't good." Claire studied the display cases with the concentration of someone making a life or death decision. Ethan watched her, trying to figure out why she was really here. The bakery wasn't in a business district. She couldn't just be passing by, which meant she'd come deliberately, had looked up the address, had made a choice to walk through that door. "The almond croissant," she said finally. And a coffee. Black. Woman after my own heart. Everyone else wants their coffee dressed up like a dessert. He poured the coffee, plated the croissant, and slid both across the counter. When Claire reached for her wallet, Ethan shook his head. On the house. First-time customer discount. I can pay. I know you can, but I'm not going to let you. They stood there for a moment, engaged in that peculiar standoff that happens when someone tries to be generous and the other person doesn't know how to accept it gracefully. Finally, Claire relented, tucking her wallet back into her bag. Thank you. Don't mention it. She didn't leave. Instead, she moved to one of the small tables by the window, the same spot where Mr. Patterson usually sat, and Ethan felt a strange flutter in his chest. Hope and fear tangled together in a way he didn't quite understand. The morning rush picked up, and Ethan got busy with the stream of regular customers. The Ramirez sisters splitting their cinnamon roll, young professionals grabbing pastries to go, a construction crew from the building site 2 blocks over, buying out half the sandwich case for lunch. Through it all, Claire sat at her table, making her coffee and croissant last far longer than they should, occasionally glancing up from her phone to watch him work. By 10 o'clock, the rush had died down, and Ethan found himself with a rare moment of quiet. He poured himself a cup of coffee, and before he could second-guess it, walked over to Claire's table. Mind if I sit? She gestured to the empty chair. It's your bakery. Customer service. He sat, the chair creaking under his weight. Making sure you're enjoying your breakfast. It's good. Really good. The croissant is perfect. Flaky without being greasy, sweet without being cloying, and the coffee is exactly what coffee should be. High praise. I'm serious. I've lived in this city for 5 years, and I've tried a lot of bakeries. This is top 3. Easy. Ethan felt a warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the coffee. Top 3. I'll take it. They fell into an easy silence, the kind that felt comfortable rather than awkward. Outside the window, the morning continued its usual routine, people hurrying past, cars inching through traffic, the city moving at its relentless pace. Can I ask you something? Claire said. Sure. Why did you really come to the cafe the other day? And don't say it was just because your mother asked you to. Ethan considered the question, turning his coffee cup in his hands. Guilt, mostly. My mom asked, and I couldn't think of a good reason to say no that didn't make me sound like a jerk. And maybe, I don't know, maybe I was curious. About what? About what kind of person agrees to a blind date with my brother. Claire laughed. That's fair. What kind of person did you find? Someone a lot more interesting than Daniel deserves. The words hung between them, more honest than Ethan had intended. Claire's expression shifted, something warming in her eyes. For what it's worth, she said, I'm glad he was sick. I'm glad you came instead. Before Ethan could respond, the bell above the door chimed, and a woman with a stroller maneuvered her way inside, struggling with the narrow doorway. Ethan stood automatically, moving to help, and the moment broke. The rest of the morning passed in the usual way, customers coming and going, bread coming out of the ovens, the endless cycle of work that filled his days. Claire stayed for another hour, then gathered her things and approached the counter. I should get to work. I'm already late for a meeting I don't want to attend. Thanks for stopping by. I'll come back, if that's okay. It's okay. She smiled, and there it was again. That transformation, that lightening of her features that made her look younger and less guarded. Then she was gone, the bell chiming behind her, and Ethan was left standing behind his counter, wondering what exactly had just happened. The afternoon stretched ahead with its familiar tasks, but Ethan found his mind wandering back to the woman who'd sat at his table for an hour, making a single croissant and a cup of coffee last while she watched him work. It didn't mean anything, he told himself. She was just being friendly. People did that sometimes. They found a place they liked and they came back. It wasn't personal. But when he picked up Oliver from school that afternoon, walking their usual route home, he couldn't quite shake the feeling that something had shifted, that the careful equilibrium of his life had been nudged slightly off balance. Dad, you're smiling, Oliver observed, looking up at him with those serious dark eyes. Am I? Yeah. Did something good happen? No, just a good day, I guess. Oliver seemed satisfied with that answer, launching into a detailed account of his day at school, something involving a science experiment and a classmate who'd accidentally created a small explosion with baking soda and vinegar. Ethan listened with half his attention, making the appropriate sounds of interest while his thoughts drifted elsewhere. That night, after Oliver was in bed and the bakery was prepped for the next day, Ethan sat at his kitchen table with his laptop, ostensibly reviewing inventory orders, but actually finding himself typing Claire Morgan into the search bar before he could think better of it. Her LinkedIn profile came up first: professional headshot, impressive resume, all the markers of success in the corporate world. University of Michigan for undergrad, Northwestern for her MBA. 5 years at her current company, steady progression up the ladder. Awards, commendations, all the things that indicated someone who had their life figured out. Ethan closed the laptop, feeling foolish. What was he doing? She'd stopped by his bakery once. That didn't mean anything. And even if it did, what could he possibly offer someone like her? A struggling business, a cramped apartment, a life built entirely around the needs of a 6-year-old child. He went to bed telling himself to forget about it, to focus on what mattered: his son, his work, the daily rhythm of survival that left no room for complications like attraction or hope or the dangerous fantasy of something more. But Claire came back the next day, and the day after that. She had a routine, Ethan learned. She'd arrive around 8:30, order a coffee and whatever pastry caught her eye that morning, and sit at the same table by the window. Sometimes she worked on her laptop, fingers flying across the keys while she frowned at spreadsheets or presentations. Sometimes she just sat, drinking her coffee slowly, watching the street outside or the activity in the bakery with an expression of peaceful contentment. Ethan tried to act normal, to treat her like any other customer, but he found himself paying attention to small things. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was concentrating. The reading glasses she put on when she worked on her laptop, black-framed and slightly too big for her face. The fact that she always added exactly 1 sugar to her second cup of coffee, but drank the first one black. On Thursday, during a rare quiet moment, she called him over to her table. "Can I ask you something about the croissants?" Ethan sat across from her, hyper-aware of the flour still dusting his hands despite having washed them twice. "What about them? How do you get them so perfect? I've tried making them at home, and they always turn out dense or greasy, or both. It's all about temperature control. The butter has to stay cold but pliable. Too warm, and it melts into the dough. Too cold, and it cracks. And you need to be patient with the lamination process. Most people rush it." Lamination? The folding and rolling that creates the layers. Each fold creates more layers, and those layers are what make croissants flaky. But if you rush it, or if the temperature isn't right, the layers collapse. Claire leaned forward, genuinely interested. "Could you teach me?" "To make croissants?" "Why not? I'm a disaster in the kitchen, but I'd like to learn, and you obviously know what you're doing." Ethan hesitated. This felt like crossing a line, moving from casual customer interaction into something more deliberate, more personal. But Claire was looking at him with such earnest interest, and when was the last time someone had wanted to learn something from him, had valued his knowledge and skill? "Yeah," he heard himself say. "Yeah, I could teach you." "Really?" "Sure. It's not that complicated once you understand the principles. When do you want to do it?" "When are you free?" The question almost made him laugh. Free. He hadn't been free in 3 years, not in any meaningful sense of the word. His life was scheduled down to the minute: baking, opening the shop, pick up and drop off, closing, prep for the next day, a few hours of sleep, repeat. "Sundays," he said. "The bakery's closed on Sundays. I could teach you then, if you don't mind having a 6-year-old as an audience." Something flickered across Claire's face, but it wasn't the hesitation or discomfort he'd expected at the mention of Oliver. If anything, she looked pleased. "That sounds perfect." They exchanged numbers, and Ethan tried to ignore the way his heart rate picked up when he saved her contact information in his phone. This was just teaching someone to bake, he told himself. Nothing more complicated than that. But when Sunday came and Claire showed up at his door at 9 in the morning, wearing jeans and an old college sweatshirt, and looking more relaxed than he'd ever seen her, Ethan knew he was lying to himself. Oliver answered the door, Mr. Whiskers clutched in one hand, his eyes going wide when he saw a stranger standing in the hallway. Hi, Claire said, crouching down to his level. You must be Oliver. I'm Claire. Your dad's going to teach me how to make croissants. Is that okay with you? Oliver looked back at Ethan, who nodded encouragingly. Do you know how to make them? Oliver asked Claire, his voice serious. No, that's why I need to learn. Do you know how? I know a little bit. Dad taught me about the layers. Maybe you can help teach me too then. Oliver considered this, then nodded solemnly. Okay, but you have to wash your hands first. That's the rule. Claire laughed, and the sound filled the small apartment with a warmth that had been missing for longer than Ethan wanted to admit. That's a very good rule. They worked in the bakery's kitchen, Ethan walking Claire through each step while Oliver sat on a stool, offering commentary and asking questions with the unfiltered curiosity of a 6-year-old. Claire was a terrible baker. Her measurements were imprecise, her folding technique was clumsy, and she kept forgetting to flour the work surface, but she laughed at her mistakes and asked questions and didn't seem embarrassed by her incompetence. This is harder than it looks, she said, attempting to roll out the dough for the 3rd time while it kept springing back. That's because you're fighting it. Let it rest between rolls. The gluten needs time to relax. The gluten needs therapy, apparently. Oliver giggled at that, and Ethan found himself smiling despite the chaos Claire was creating in his carefully organized kitchen. They worked for 2 hours, and by the end they had a batch of croissants that were passable, if not exactly bakery quality. But more than that, they'd created something else. A memory, a moment. The 3 of them covered in flour and laughing at Claire's disaster of a first attempt. They're not pretty, Claire said, looking at the finished products cooling on the rack, but they smell amazing. They'll taste fine. Probably. Maybe. Your confidence in my abilities is overwhelming. Oliver climbed down from his stool and approached Claire carefully, still clutching Mr. Whiskers. I think they're good. You tried really hard. Claire's expression softened, and she crouched down again to his level. Thank you, Oliver. That's very kind of you to say. Do you want to see my dinosaurs? I have 17 of them. 17? That's a lot of dinosaurs. I know all their names, the scientific ones, not just the regular ones. Claire glanced up at Ethan, a question in her eyes. He shrugged. Whatever this was, it was Oliver's decision to make, not his. I'd love to see your dinosaurs, Claire said. And just like that, she was sitting on Oliver's bedroom floor, listening with apparent fascination as his son explained the difference between a Brachiosaurus and a Brontosaurus, why velociraptors were actually much smaller than movies made them seem, and his theory about what really killed the dinosaurs that involved both an asteroid and volcanoes, because why can't it be both? Ethan stood in the doorway watching them and felt something crack open in his chest, something that had been sealed shut for so long he'd forgotten it was there. This woman, this stranger who'd walked into his bakery less than 2 weeks ago, was sitting on his son's floor holding Mr. Whiskers while Oliver demonstrated how a T-Rex hunted, and it felt right in a way that scared him more than anything had in years. When Claire finally left, promising Oliver she'd come back to see his dinosaurs again, Ethan walked her to the door. They stood in the hallway, neither quite sure how to end the morning. Thank you, Claire said, for teaching me, and for letting me spend time with Oliver. He's wonderful. He likes you. He doesn't usually warm up to strangers that quickly. I'm glad he does. I like him too. She hesitated, then added, I like this. Being here. It feels real in a way most of my life doesn't. Ethan didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded, and they stood there in the hallway for another moment before Claire smiled and turned to leave. Over the next 2 weeks, a pattern emerged. Claire came to the bakery most mornings, stayed for an hour or two, sometimes working on her laptop, but mostly just being present. On Sunday, she came back to the apartment, and this time she brought ingredients for chocolate chip cookies, which turned out significantly better than her croissants, much to Oliver's delight. Ethan's mother called during the 2nd week, ostensibly to check on him, but really to ask about that woman Carolyn mentioned who keeps visiting your bakery. How does Carolyn know about that? Mrs. Chen told her book club, and Carolyn's in the book club. You know how news travels. So? Are you going to tell me about her? There's nothing to tell. She's just a customer who likes the coffee. A customer who comes every day and spends time with your son? Ethan, I wasn't born yesterday. Mom, I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying, It's been a long time since you've had anyone in your life besides Oliver and that bakery. Maybe it's time. Time for what? To let yourself have something just for you, to be happy. There was that word again. Happy. It kept coming up, kept inserting itself into his thoughts at odd moments. Ethan didn't know how to explain to his mother that happiness felt like a luxury he couldn't afford, that wanting something for himself felt selfish when Oliver needed so much, when the bakery demanded everything he had. But then Claire would walk through his door, and Oliver would light up in a way Ethan hadn't seen since the early days before he understood his mother wasn't coming back, and Ethan would think maybe there was room for something else in their carefully constructed life. The shift happened gradually, like bread rising, so slow you couldn't see it happening, but undeniable in its transformation. Claire started staying later, helping close up the bakery while Ethan did the end-of-day cleanup. She learned Oliver's favorite pastry, the apple Danish with extra cinnamon, and started bringing one for him when she visited on Sundays. She remembered details Ethan mentioned in passing, asked follow-up questions, treated his mundane life like it was interesting and worth knowing about. And Ethan, despite every instinct that told him to be careful, to protect himself and Oliver from the possibility of disappointment, found himself opening up in ways he hadn't with anyone in years. He told her about his father, about the pressure of living up to a legacy while watching the neighborhood change around him, about the loneliness of single parenthood, the constant fear that he was somehow failing Oliver by not being enough. Claire listened without offering easy platitudes or solutions, just listened, and somehow that was exactly what he needed. 3 weeks after that first morning visit, Claire arrived at the bakery during the afternoon lull, and Ethan could tell immediately that something was different. She looked tense, her shoulders rigid, her smile forced. "Coffee?" he asked. "Something stronger would be better, but coffee will have to do." He poured her a cup, and when she pulled out her wallet, he waved her off. They'd long since stopped going through the motions of her trying to pay. Rough day? Rough month, rough year, honestly. She wrapped her hands around the coffee cup like she was trying to draw warmth from it. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you ever feel like you're living someone else's life? Like you made choices that made sense at the time, and now you're stuck with them, and you can't remember why you made them in the first place?" Ethan thought about his father's bakery, about the law school acceptance letter he'd never opened, about the life he'd planned that had been derailed by a positive pregnancy test, and a woman who'd decided motherhood wasn't for her after all. "Every day," he said honestly. "How do you deal with it?" "I don't know that I do. I just keep moving forward because stopping isn't an option when you've got someone depending on you." Claire nodded slowly. "My boss offered me a promotion today, VP of Marketing. It's everything I'm supposed to want. More money, more prestige, corner office, the whole package." "That's good, right?" I said no. Ethan stared at her. "You said no to a promotion?" "I said no because accepting it would mean more travel, longer hours, less time for anything that's not work." And I realized, sitting in that office, looking at my boss's tired face and thinking about his third divorce, that I don't want that life. I don't want to wake up in 10 years and realize I've spent my entire existence climbing a ladder I don't even care about. "What do you want?" "I don't know. That's the terrifying part. I spent so long doing what I was supposed to do, the right schools, the right career, the right everything, that I never stopped to ask myself what I actually wanted. And now I'm 32 years old, and I have no idea." The vulnerability in her voice made something shift in Ethan's chest. He came around the counter, sat at the table across from her, close enough that their knees almost touched. "Can I tell you something?" he said. "Please?" "I never wanted to be a baker. I wanted to be a lawyer or maybe a teacher, something that required a degree and a suit and air conditioning. But my dad had a heart attack, and someone needed to run the bakery, and I was the one who was here. And at first I resented it. Every morning I'd wake up angry that this was my life. But somewhere along the way it stopped feeling like a prison and started feeling like, I don't know, purpose, maybe, or at least something worth doing." "Do you regret it, the life you didn't get to live?" "Sometimes, but mostly I'm just grateful for what I have. My son, this place, the chance to make something with my hands that brings people a small amount of joy in their day. It's not glamorous, but it's real." Claire reached across the table and took his hand, her fingers threading through his flour-dusted ones. The touch sent electricity up Ethan's arm, made his breath catch in his throat. You make it sound simple. It's not simple. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. But it's mine, you know? This life, this choice, it belongs to me. They sat there for a long moment, hands linked across the table, and Ethan felt the weight of everything unspoken building between them. This wasn't just friendship anymore. It hadn't been for a while. They both knew it, had been dancing around it for weeks, but neither had been brave enough to name it. The bell above the door chimed, breaking the moment. An elderly man shuffled in, and Ethan reluctantly pulled his hand away, stood, moved back behind the counter to take the order. But when he glanced back at Claire, she was still there, still watching him with something soft and hopeful in her eyes. And Ethan knew with absolute certainty that his carefully ordered life was about to get very complicated. And for the first time in 3 years, he found himself welcoming the complication. The complication arrived on a Tuesday morning, 3 days after Claire had held his hand across the table, in the form of Daniel standing in the bakery doorway looking healthy and irritated. Ethan was restocking the display case when he noticed his brother, and his first instinct was to pretend he hadn't seen him. But Daniel had already spotted him, was already making his way to the counter with that particular expression he wore when he wanted something. "We need to talk," Daniel said without preamble. "I'm working." "It's 8 in the morning. You've got maybe 2 customers. You can spare 5 minutes. Ethan straightened, wiping his hands on his apron. "What do you want?" "Mom told me about Claire, about how she's been coming here. Every day." "And?" "And I want to know what you think you're doing." The presumption in his brother's voice made something hot and sharp flare in Ethan's chest. "I'm not doing anything. She comes to buy coffee. Last time I checked, that's what bakeries are for." "Don't play stupid. You know what I mean. She was supposed to be my date, my potential relationship, and you swooped in. I didn't swoop anywhere. You were sick. I did Mom a favor by explaining in person. That's it." "That's not what Carolyn says. She says Claire talks about you, about your bakery, about your kid." Daniel leaned against the counter, his expression hardening. "What's your angle here, Ethan? You trying to prove something? Show that you can take something from me for once?" The accusation was so absurd, so completely divorced from reality, that Ethan almost laughed. "You really think that's what this is about? Competition with you?" "What else would it be? You see a successful woman interested in me, and suddenly you're Mr. Charming, showing her your quaint little bakery and your adorable kid, playing the sympathetic single father card. Get out." Daniel blinked. "What?" "I said get out. Get out of my bakery." "Ethan, come on." "No. You don't get to come in here and accuse me of manipulating someone. You don't get to act like I'm some kind of schemer when all I did was have a conversation with a woman you never even met. You want to know the truth? She doesn't want anything to do with you. She told me that. Before any of this started, before she ever walked through that door, she told me she hoped you wouldn't call her." Daniel's face flushed red. "Because you poisoned her against me. Because she met me and realized you'd be exactly like this, entitled and self-centered and completely incapable of understanding that maybe, just maybe, someone might prefer a different kind of life than the one you think everyone should want." "A different kind of life? You mean your life? Working 18-hour days in a failing business? Raising a kid alone in a 2-bedroom apartment above a bakery? That's what you think she wants?" The words hit their mark, finding every insecurity Ethan had been wrestling with for weeks. Because wasn't that the question he'd been asking himself? What could he possibly offer someone like Claire? Daniel was right about the facts, even if he was wrong about everything else. Ethan's life was small and constrained and built entirely around survival, not success. "What I think doesn't matter," Ethan said quietly. "What she wants is up to her. Now get out before I make you leave." Daniel stared at him for a long moment, and Ethan saw something shift in his brother's expression, a calculation, a decision being made. Then Daniel smiled, but there was nothing warm in it. "Fine. But when this blows up in your face, when she realizes what she'd be giving up to play house with you, don't come crying to me." He left, the bell chiming aggressively as he shoved through the door, and Ethan stood behind his counter, his hands shaking with anger and something else. Fear, maybe. because Daniel had articulated every doubt Ethan had been trying to suppress. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Claire didn't come by, which shouldn't have bothered Ethan, but did. He kept glancing at the door, expecting to see her walk through, and each time it was someone else, the disappointment cut a little deeper. That evening, while Oliver did his homework at the kitchen table, Ethan's phone buzzed with a text from Claire. "Rough day. Can't make it by the bakery. Sorry." He stared at the message, reading between the lines for subtext that might not even be there. Was she avoiding him? Had Daniel somehow gotten to her, said something that had changed her mind? Ethan typed out 3 different responses before settling on, "No worries, hope tomorrow's better." She didn't reply. The silence stretched through Wednesday and Thursday. Claire didn't come to the bakery, didn't text, didn't call. Ethan tried to act normal, to focus on his work and his son, but he kept catching himself staring at the empty table by the window, the spot where she usually sat. On Friday afternoon, his mother called. "Daniel told me what happened," she said without preamble. "Of course he did." "He's upset, Ethan. He thinks you betrayed him." "I didn't betray anyone. He never even met her. You can't betray someone over a person they don't know." His mother sighed. "I'm not saying you did anything wrong. I'm just telling you what he thinks. And more importantly, I'm telling you to be careful." "Careful of what?" "Of your heart. Of Oliver's heart. This woman, Claire, she seems lovely. And I'm happy you found someone who makes you smile again. But Daniel's right about one thing. You and she come from very different worlds. Have you thought about what happens if this doesn't work out?" "It's not even... We're not..." Ethan struggled to find the words. "We're just friends, Mom." "Friends don't look at each other the way you two do. I saw you together at the bakery last week when I stopped by. You didn't even notice me come in because you were so focused on her." Ethan closed his eyes. "What do you want me to say?" "I want you to be realistic. I want you to think about what happens when she gets tired of playing in your world and goes back to hers. I want you to protect yourself. And more than that, I want you to protect Oliver. He's already lost one mother. Don't let him get attached to someone who might not stay." The conversation haunted Ethan through the weekend. Oliver kept asking when Claire was coming back, and each time Ethan had to say he didn't know, he felt the weight of his mother's warning settle heavier on his shoulders. Sunday morning arrived, and Ethan was mixing dough for Monday's bread when his phone rang. Claire. He almost didn't answer. But curiosity and something stronger, hope, need, the desperate want to hear her voice, won out. "Hello?" "Hi." She sounded tired. "I'm sorry I've been MIA. Work's been insane." "It's fine. You don't owe me an explanation." "I know, but I want to give you one anyway. Can I come over? I know it's our usual day, but if you're busy..." "We're not busy. Come over." She arrived 20 minutes later, and Ethan could see immediately that something was wrong. She looked exhausted, her eyes shadowed with dark circles, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail that suggested she hadn't had time to care about her appearance. Oliver ran to greet her, wrapping his arms around her waist in a hug that made Ethan's chest tighten. "You're back. Dad said he didn't know when you were coming back. And I thought maybe you were sick like Uncle Daniel was sick. But then I thought maybe you just didn't want to visit anymore." "Hey!" Claire crouched down to Oliver's level, her hands on his shoulders. "I will always want to visit you. Sometimes grown-ups have things they have to do for work, and it takes up a lot of time, but that doesn't mean I don't want to be here. Okay?" Oliver nodded, seemingly satisfied, then grabbed her hand. "I drew you a picture. Do you want to see it?" "I'd love to see it." While Oliver dragged Claire to the refrigerator where his artwork was displayed with magnets, Ethan made coffee, his movements automatic while his mind churned. When Oliver finally went to his room to play, Claire joined Ethan at the kitchen table. "I need to tell you something," she said. Ethan's stomach dropped. This was it, the moment his mother had warned him about, the inevitable conclusion to a connection that had always been too good to be true. "Okay." Claire wrapped her hands around her coffee mug, not drinking, just holding it like she needed something to do with her hands. "My boss didn't accept my no very well. He's been pressuring me all week to reconsider the promotion, and my colleagues, they found out I turned it down, and they have opinions about it." "What kind of opinions?" "The kind that involve a lot of speculation about why I'd make such a stupid career move. And somehow, someone found out about you. About this. She gestured vaguely at the apartment, the bakery below, the life Ethan had built. And now there are rumors that I'm throwing away my career for some guy I barely know. Are you? The question came out harsher than Ethan intended. What? Throwing away your career. For me. Claire looked at him, and he saw something flash in her eyes. Hurt, maybe, or disappointment. Is that really what you think this is about? You? I don't know what to think. My brother showed up at the bakery on Tuesday, told me I was playing some kind of game, that I was taking advantage of you. Then you disappeared for almost a week. Then my mother called to warn me about getting my heart broken. So yeah, I'm a little confused about what's happening here. Your brother came to see you? He seems to think I stole you from him, which is ridiculous since he never met you, but apparently that doesn't matter. Claire set down her coffee mug with enough force that liquid sloshed over the side. I am so tired of men thinking they have some kind of claim on my decisions. Your brother thinks I owe him a chance because someone set us up on a date he didn't even show up for. My boss thinks I owe him gratitude and compliance because he offered me a promotion. My colleagues think I'm an idiot for not organizing my entire life around career advancement. And now you're asking me if I'm throwing away my career for you, like my choices are some kind of reflection of what I think you're worth instead of what I think my life should look like. Her voice had risen with each sentence, and Ethan saw Oliver's bedroom door open a crack, his son peeking out to see what the commotion was about. He held up a hand to let Oliver know everything was okay, then turned back to Claire. I'm sorry, you're right. That was a stupid question. It was. Because this isn't about you, Ethan. Or it's not just about you. It's about me realizing that I've been living a life I don't actually want. Do you have any idea what it's like to wake up every morning and go to a job that pays you well but makes you feel empty? To sit in meetings about market positioning and brand strategy and wonder if anything you're doing actually matters to anyone? No. I wake up every morning and make bread. It's simple. It matters because people need to eat. Exactly. That's exactly it. You make something real, something tangible. You have this incredible relationship with your son, and you've built this business with your own hands, and you know what you're doing has value because you can see it, taste it, hold it. And when I'm here in this apartment, watching you teach Oliver about dinosaurs or showing me how to fold croissant dough, I feel more alive than I have in years. Ethan wanted to believe her, wanted to take her words at face value and let himself hope. But years of disappointment had taught him to be careful, to question anything that seemed too good to be true. What about in 6 months? He asked quietly. When the novelty wears off? When you remember that my life is early mornings and long hours and a kid who needs help with homework and cheap pasta for dinner 3 nights a week because that's all I can afford? What happens when you miss your corner office and your salary and the world you left behind? Claire stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. You want to know what I'll miss? I'll miss feeling like I'm not enough. I'll miss my boss's disappointed face every time I try to leave the office before 8 p.m. I'll miss my mother calling to ask when I'm going to settle down with someone appropriate, meaning someone with the right degree from the right school who works at the right company. I'll miss lying awake at night wondering if this is all there is, if I'm going to spend the next 30 years climbing a ladder that leads nowhere I actually want to go. Claire, no, let me finish. You think I don't know what I'd be giving up? You think I haven't thought about it? I have a spreadsheet, Ethan, an actual spreadsheet comparing the pros and cons of staying in my career versus making a change. And you know what I realized while I was making it? The things in the pro column for staying, money, prestige, security, they're all external. They're all about what other people think my life should look like. But the things in the pro column for leaving, feeling useful, having time for relationships, doing work that has meaning, those are internal. Those are about what I think my life should look like. She was breathing hard, her cheeks flushed with emotion, and Ethan had never seen her look more beautiful or more fierce. I'm not asking you to save me, she continued. I'm not looking for someone to rescue me from my terrible corporate job. I'm capable of making my own decisions and living with the consequences. What I'm asking is for you to trust that I know my own mind, that when I say I want to be here, with you, with Oliver, learning to make croissants and eating dinosaur-shaped chicken nuggets and living a simpler life, I mean it. Even if it means giving up everything you've worked for? I'm not giving it up. I'm trading it for something better, There's a difference. Oliver emerged fully from his room now, Mr. Whiskers clutched in his arms. Are you fighting? Claire's expression immediately softened. She crossed to Oliver, kneeling down to his level. We're not fighting. We're just talking about grown-up stuff. Sometimes grown-ups need to have conversations that sound like fighting, but aren't really fighting. Does that make sense? Not really. That's okay. The important thing is that everything's fine. I promise. Oliver looked between Claire and Ethan, his serious eyes assessing the situation with the uncanny perception children sometimes had. Are you leaving, like Mom did? The question hung in the air like smoke, and Ethan felt his heart crack open at the fear in his son's voice. This was exactly what his mother had warned him about. Oliver was already attached, already vulnerable to the kind of hurt that came from people leaving. Claire's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away from Oliver. No, sweetheart. I'm not leaving. I'm right here, and I plan to stay right here for as long as you and your dad will have me. Promise? I promise. Pinky promise? Claire held out her pinky, and Oliver wrapped his smaller one around it, the gesture so simple and yet so binding that Ethan felt his own eyes sting with unshed tears. After Oliver went back to his room, Claire and Ethan sat in silence for a long moment. Outside, the city continued its usual Sunday rhythm. Church bells in the distance, families walking to brunch, the ambient noise of life happening all around them. I can't promise this will be easy, Ethan said finally. My life is complicated. There's always going to be early mornings and money worries and a kid who needs attention. I can't offer you the kind of life you're used to. I don't want the life I'm used to. I want this. I want chaos and early mornings and a kid who teaches me about dinosaurs. I want to learn how to make bread and close up the bakery with you at night and be part of something that feels real. What about your job? I'm going to quit. I've already started looking at other options. Maybe consulting work, something with flexible hours that I can do remotely. Or maybe I'll try something completely different. I've always wanted to learn graphic design. The point is, I have choices. And one of those choices is building a life that makes me happy instead of one that looks good on paper. Ethan studied her face, looking for any sign of doubt or hesitation. But all he saw was determination and something else. Hope, maybe, or the kind of courage it took to walk away from everything safe and familiar toward something uncertain, but true. My mother thinks you'll change your mind, he said. My brother thinks I'm taking advantage of you. Half the time I think I'm crazy for even considering this. And the other half? The other half of the time, I think maybe this is the sanest thing either of us has done in years. Claire smiled, and it was like watching the sun come out from behind clouds. So where does that leave us? I don't know. Terrified? Hopeful? Both? Both sounds about right. She reached across the table and took his hand, the same gesture she'd made days ago, but this time it felt different. Less tentative, more certain. Ethan threaded his fingers through hers, feeling the calluses on his palm press against her smooth skin, the physical reminder of how different their lives had been up until now. I need you to understand something, he said. Oliver comes first. Always. If this doesn't work out, if you decide this isn't what you want, I need you to tell me before he gets more attached than he already is. I can handle my own heartbreaking, but I can't handle watching his break. I understand. And I meant what I told him. I'm not going anywhere. People say that. I know, but I'm not people, and I'm not her. The reference to Oliver's mother hung between them. That ghost that had haunted Ethan's relationships, or lack thereof, for 3 years. The woman who'd looked at their son and decided motherhood wasn't for her, who'd walked away without a backward glance and never returned. The woman who'd taught Ethan that promises didn't always mean what they were supposed to mean. No, Ethan agreed quietly. You're not. They spent the rest of the afternoon together, the three of them. Claire helped Oliver build an elaborate dinosaur habitat out of blocks and blankets. They made grilled cheese sandwiches for lunch, and Claire burned hers because she got distracted arguing with Oliver about whether pterodactyls were technically dinosaurs. They watched a nature documentary about the ocean, and Oliver fell asleep between them on the couch, his head on Claire's shoulder and his feet in Ethan's lap. In the evening, after Oliver was in bed, Ethan walked Claire to the door. They stood in the hallway, neither wanting to end the day, but both knowing it had to end. Thank you, Claire said, for listening, for not making this easy. Easy? You could have just accepted my words at face value, told me everything I wanted to hear. But you pushed back. You made me really think about what I'm saying, what I'm asking for. That matters. I'm scared, Ethan admitted. I haven't let myself want anything for so long, and now I want this so badly, it terrifies me. Good. I'm scared too. Maybe that means we're doing something right. She leaned in and kissed him on the cheek, a brief press of lips against skin that sent electricity through his entire body. Then she was gone, heading down the stairs to the street, and Ethan stood in the hallway feeling like something fundamental had shifted in his world. The following week brought challenges they hadn't anticipated. Claire's resignation sparked a firestorm at her company. Her boss called her immature and short-sighted. Her colleagues whispered about her throwing away her future. HR tried to convince her to take a leave of absence instead of quitting outright. But Claire held firm, serving her notice and beginning the process of dismantling the career she'd spent a decade building. Meanwhile, Daniel called Ethan 3 times, each conversation more hostile than the last, until Ethan finally stopped answering. His mother wavered between support and concern, wanting him to be happy but worried about the speed at which everything was happening. And through it all, Claire kept showing up. She came to the bakery every morning before work during her notice period. She learned Oliver's schedule and his routines and the specific way he liked his sandwiches cut. She helped Ethan with inventory on Wednesday evenings and learned to work the register on Saturday mornings when the bakery got busy. But the outside pressure was building. One evening, 3 weeks after their conversation in the apartment, Claire arrived at the bakery in tears. "What happened?" Ethan asked, immediately moving from behind the counter to where she stood. "I ran into an old friend from business school. She heard I quit, and she spent 20 minutes telling me how disappointed she was, how I was letting down every woman who'd worked to break into leadership positions, how I was throwing away opportunities other people would kill for." Claire swiped at her eyes angrily. "And the worst part is, part of me believes her. Part of me thinks I'm making a terrible mistake." Ethan pulled her into his arms, feeling her shake against him. "Do you want to go back? To your old job?" "No, but I wish I was more certain. I wish everyone would stop telling me I'm ruining my life." "They're not in your life. You are." "I know, but it's hard to keep believing that when everyone around you thinks you're crazy." That night, lying in bed, Ethan stared at the ceiling and wondered if his mother and Daniel and Claire's colleagues were right. Maybe he was being selfish, letting Claire upend her entire life for something that might not last. Maybe the responsible thing would be to end this now, before anyone got hurt worse than they already were. But when he thought about not seeing Claire tomorrow morning, about going back to his old routine without her presence in it, the loss felt unbearable. And that scared him most of all. How quickly she'd become essential. How thoroughly she'd woven herself into the fabric of his and Oliver's life. The breaking point came on a rainy Thursday, exactly 1 month after Claire had first walked into the bakery. Ethan was closing up when his brother appeared once again in the doorway. "We need to talk," Daniel said. "I thought we'd said everything there was to say." "Not even close. Let me in, Ethan. Please." Against his better judgment, Ethan unlocked the door. Daniel walked in, looking around the bakery with an expression Ethan couldn't quite read. "You know what our problem is?" Daniel said. "We've never been honest with each other. Not really. So I'm going to be honest now. Are you listening?" "I'm listening." "I don't care about Claire. I never did. I agreed to that blind date because Mom was nagging me, and it was easier to say yes than to argue. When I got sick and couldn't go, I was relieved." Daniel ran a hand through his hair. "But then Mom told me Claire was interested in you, that she was spending time here, and I felt, I don't know, left out maybe, jealous. Not because I wanted her, but because you had something I didn't, something real." Ethan stared at his brother, speechless. "My life looks good on paper," Daniel continued. "Big salary, nice apartment, important job, but it's empty. I work 80 hours a week, and for what? To make partners at my firm richer? To win cases I don't care about? I come home to an empty apartment, order takeout, and fall asleep watching television. That's not a life, that's just existence." "Daniel, I'm not done. You have something I want, Ethan. You have purpose. You have Oliver. You have this place that people actually care about. And now you have a woman who's willing to give up everything she's built just to be part of your world. Do you know how rare that is? Do you understand what you have? Yes. That's why I'm terrified of screwing it up. You want to know how to screw it up? Listen to people like me, people who are bitter and lonely and don't understand what it means to have something worth fighting for. Claire is fighting for you. The least you can do is fight for her too. The words landed like a punch, knocking the breath from Ethan's lungs. Because Daniel was right. Claire was fighting against her colleagues' judgment, her boss's pressure, the voice in her own head that said she was making a mistake. And what was Ethan doing? Doubting, hesitating, letting his fear make decisions that should be made by his heart. I should go, Daniel said. But before I do, I need to tell you I'm sorry. For the things I said before. For making this harder than it needed to be. You deserve to be happy, and if Claire makes you happy, then hold on to her. Don't let her go because people like me don't understand what you have. After Daniel left, Ethan stood in the empty bakery, rain drumming against the windows, and made a decision. He was done being careful, done protecting himself from potential hurt. If Claire was brave enough to rebuild her life around the possibility of them, then he could be brave enough to believe in that possibility. He pulled out his phone and called her. "Hi," Claire answered, her voice cautious. "I need to tell you something." "Okay." "I've been so focused on all the ways this could go wrong that I haven't let myself think about what happens if it goes right. And that's not fair to you. You're showing up every day, putting yourself out there, dealing with everyone's opinions and judgments, and I've been holding back because I'm scared. But I'm done being scared." There was a long pause. Then Claire said, her voice thick with emotion, "What does that mean?" "It means I'm all in. Whatever this is, whatever it becomes. I want it. I want you. I want to see where this goes without one foot out the door in case it doesn't work. I want to be as brave as you are." "Ethan, I'm not done. You asked me once if I was happy, and I said I didn't know. But I know now. I'm happy when you're here. Oliver's happy when you're here. And I don't want to waste any more time pretending that doesn't matter just because some people think we're moving too fast or making a mistake. Let them think what they want. I know what I want." Claire was crying now. He could hear it in her breathing, in the small sounds she was making. "I want that too, so much. Then let's stop asking for permission. Let's stop waiting for everyone else to approve. Let's just do this." "Okay," Claire said. "Yes. Okay." They talked for another hour about logistics and timelines and what came next. Claire's last day at her company was in 2 weeks. She'd already found consulting work that would let her set her own hours. She'd been apartment hunting, looking for something closer to the bakery, but maybe that wasn't necessary anymore. Maybe there was another solution. When they finally hung up, Ethan felt lighter than he had in weeks. The doubts weren't gone entirely. He wasn't naive enough to think they would be, but they were quieter now, drowned out by something stronger. Hope. Certainty. The conviction that sometimes the best things in life came from the choices that scared you most. He went upstairs and stood in Oliver's doorway, watching his son sleep, and whispered a promise into the darkness. "I'm going to get this right. For both of us. I'm going to choose happiness instead of fear. And I'm going to trust that the people who are meant to stay will stay." Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing the city clean. And inside the bakery apartment, Ethan Brooks, single father, reluctant baker, man who'd stopped believing in second chances, allowed himself to believe in the possibility of something more. The rain had stopped by morning, leaving the streets clean and glistening under early sunlight that filtered through the bakery windows in golden streams. Ethan stood at his usual station, hands deep in sourdough starter, when Claire walked through the door at 7:15, carrying 2 canvas bags and wearing an expression that was equal parts nervous and determined. "You're early," Ethan said, though his heart was already racing at the sight of her. "I couldn't sleep, and I figured if I'm going to be part of this, I should learn the morning routine, the real one, the 4 a.m. wake-up, flour everywhere, burn your hands on hot oven racks routine." Ethan wiped his hands on his apron and came around the counter. "You don't have to do that. I want to. Show me how to help." So he did. He showed her how to check the overnight proofing, how to score the sourdough loaves with quick, confident cuts that would let them expand properly in the oven. She was clumsy at first, her cuts too shallow or too deep, but she didn't get frustrated. She just listened, adjusted, tried again. "Why do you cut them?" Claire asked, watching Ethan demonstrate on a round of rye. "It controls where the bread expands. Without the cuts, the crust would crack randomly. This way you're guiding it, giving it permission to grow in the right direction." Claire looked at him, and something in her expression made Ethan pause. "What?" "Nothing. Just everything you do has intention behind it. Even something as simple as cutting bread. You think about every step, every detail. I admire that." "It's just baking." "No, it's not. It's craft. It's caring enough to do things right, even when no one would notice if you took shortcuts." They worked side by side for the next 2 hours, and Ethan found himself explaining techniques he'd long since stopped thinking about. The proper way to knead, why butter temperature mattered for croissants, how to tell when bread was done just by the sound it made when you tapped the bottom. Claire absorbed it all, asking questions that showed she was really listening, really trying to understand not just the mechanics, but the why behind each step. By 9 o'clock, the morning rush was over, and they stood in the kitchen surrounded by the fruits of their labor, fresh loaves cooling on racks, pastries arranged in the display case, the warm, yeasty smell of success filling the air. "I have something to tell you," Claire said, setting down the dish rag she'd been using to wipe down the counters. "I gave my notice 2 weeks ago, but I negotiated an earlier exit. Today was my last day. I'm done." Ethan stared at her. "Today? You didn't tell me. I wanted to be sure. I wanted to walk out of that office knowing I was making the right choice, not running away from something but running toward something. And this morning, when I cleaned out my desk and turned in my security badge, I felt nothing but relief." She took a deep breath. "I'm free, Ethan. For the first time in 10 years, I get to decide what my life looks like. And I want it to look like this. Flour in your hair and burning your fingers on sheet pans? Exactly that. Plus a grumpy baker who doesn't realize how extraordinary he is, and a 6-year-old who wants to teach me about dinosaurs." Ethan pulled her close, not caring that he was getting flour all over her expensive shirt. She wrapped her arms around him, and they stood there in the middle of the bakery kitchen, holding each other while the morning light streamed through the windows and the city woke up around them. "I'm scared," Claire whispered against his shoulder. "Me too. But I'm more excited than scared. Is that crazy?" "Probably. But we can be crazy together." That afternoon, when Ethan picked up Oliver from school, his son immediately noticed something different. "You're smiling again," Oliver observed, swinging their joined hands between them as they walked. "Am I?" "Yeah, like you did that time when Claire first came over. Is she coming today?" "She is. She's going to be coming over a lot more now, actually. Is that okay with you?" Oliver stopped walking, looking up at his father with those serious eyes that sometimes seemed too old for a 6-year-old. "Is she going to live with us?" The question caught Ethan off guard. They hadn't discussed logistics that specifically yet, hadn't talked about timelines or living arrangements beyond vague references to the future. But Oliver's question cut straight to the heart of it, the way children's questions often did. "Would you want that?" "If she did." Oliver thought about it, his face scrunched up in concentration. "I think so. She's nice. And she listens when I talk about dinosaurs, even when I talk about them a lot. And she makes you happy, I can tell." "She makes me happy," Ethan agreed. "But you make me happy too. You're the most important person in my life, buddy. That doesn't change." "I know, but maybe we can have 2 important people, like how I have Mr. Whiskers and also my dinosaurs. I love them both. It doesn't have to be just one." The simple wisdom of it made Ethan's throat tight. "You're pretty smart. You know that?" "I know. Can we get ice cream on the way home?" "Nice try. It's Tuesday. Ice cream is for weekends. But today is special because Claire is coming and you're happy. Every day you try this and every day I say no. But one day you might say yes." Claire was waiting at the apartment when they arrived, and she'd brought groceries, real groceries, not just the basics Ethan usually grabbed between work and Oliver's bedtime. Fresh vegetables, good cheese, pasta that wasn't from a box, ingredients for an actual meal. "I thought I'd make dinner," she said. if that's okay. I Googled easy recipes for cooking with kids, and apparently we can make pasta from scratch. Oliver, you want to help? Oliver dropped his backpack and ran to the kitchen. We're making pasta? Like the long noodles? Exactly like the long noodles. Your dad said you like spaghetti. I love spaghetti, but Dad always makes it from the box because he says we don't have time for the fancy kind. Claire glanced at Ethan, eyebrows raised. The fancy kind? I have a bakery to run. Homemade pasta is for people with free time. Well, I have free time now, so we're making the fancy kind. Watching them work together in his small kitchen, Claire reading directions from her phone while Oliver measured flour with intense concentration, both of them covered in white powder within 10 minutes, Ethan felt something settle in his chest. This was what he'd been afraid to want. This warmth, this ease, this sense of family that he'd convinced himself was impossible after Oliver's mother left. The pasta was lumpy and uneven, and they made far too much, and the kitchen looked like a disaster zone by the time they were done. But sitting around the small table, eating imperfect noodles with homemade sauce while Oliver chattered about his day at school, felt more right than anything Ethan had experienced in years. After dinner, while Ethan did dishes and Claire helped Oliver with his reading homework, his phone buzzed with a call from his mother. "I'll be right back," he told them, stepping into his bedroom and closing the door. "Mom." "Don't mom me in that tone. I called to apologize." Ethan sat on the edge of his bed, surprised. "Apologize for what?" "For doubting you, for suggesting you were making a mistake with Claire." "Daniel came by yesterday and told me about your conversation, and it made me realize I was projecting my own fears onto your situation." His mother's voice softened. "You're not your father, Ethan, and Claire isn't your father's mother. I was so worried about history repeating itself that I forgot you get to write your own story." "What are you talking about? Grandma and Grandpa were married for 50 years. "They were, but it wasn't always happy. Your grandmother gave up a career she loved to run the bakery with your grandfather, and she resented it sometimes. I watched her struggle with that choice my whole childhood. When you told me Claire was walking away from her career, I panicked. I didn't want to see you go through what my father went through, loving someone who regretted their choices." Ethan had never heard this story, had never known his grandmother as anything other than the woman who smiled behind the bakery counter and made the best apple pie in the neighborhood. The revelation shifted something in his understanding of his family history. "But Claire isn't doing it out of obligation," Ethan said. "She's choosing this." "I know. I can see that now. And more importantly, I can see that you're not taking her choice for granted. You're scared enough to question it, which means you understand the weight of what she's giving up." "That's good, Ethan. That's healthy. It means you'll work to make sure she never regrets it." "I will, I promise." "I know you will. You're a good man, better than you give yourself credit for. Your father would be proud of what you've built, both the bakery and the life you've made for Oliver. And I think he'd like Claire too. She's got steel in her spine. You need that." After they hung up, Ethan sat in the quiet of his bedroom for a moment, letting his mother's words sink in. Then he returned to the living room where Claire was reading Oliver a book about paleontology, her voice animated as she described how scientists discovered fossils. Oliver was fighting sleep, his eyes drooping even as he insisted he wanted to hear the next chapter. Claire caught Ethan's eye and smiled, and in that moment, Ethan made a decision. "Hey, buddy," he said. "Time for bed. Say goodnight to Claire." "But we didn't finish the chapter." "I'll be here tomorrow," Claire said. "We can finish it then." Oliver perked up slightly. "Promise?" "Promise. Now go brush your teeth like your dad said." After Oliver was settled in bed, Ethan and Claire sat on the couch with cups of tea, the apartment quiet around them except for the ambient noise of the city outside the windows. "He's asleep already," Ethan said after checking on his son. "Usually he fights bedtime for at least 20 minutes. He had a big day. Pasta making is exhausting work." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, shoulders touching, content just to be near each other. Then Ethan turned to face Claire, taking both her hands in his. "Move in with us." Claire's eyes widened. "What?" "I know it's fast, I know it's probably crazy, but you're here every day anyway, and Oliver already thinks of you as part of our family, and I want to fall asleep next to you and wake up next to you and not have to say goodbye at the end of every night. So move in with us, please." "Ethan, Claire stopped, struggling for words. Are you sure? This is a huge step. I've never been more sure of anything. Look, I know we've only known each other for 2 months. I know that on paper this makes no sense. But when does love ever make sense on paper? Love? Claire's voice was barely a whisper. Yeah, love. I'm in love with you, Claire. I think I have been since that first afternoon at the cafe when you told me you hoped my brother wouldn't call. And I'm tired of pretending I'm not all in, tired of holding back because I'm scared. So I'm asking, move in. Be part of this life. Help me raise Oliver and run this bakery and figure out what comes next. Claire was crying now, tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling too. I love you too. I've been trying not to say it because I thought it was too soon, thought you'd think I was crazy. I think we're both crazy, but crazy together sounds a lot better than sane and alone. She kissed him then, properly, for the first time since this whole thing started. It was soft and sweet and tasted like tea and tears and promise. When they broke apart, Claire was laughing and crying at the same time. Yes, I'll move in. I want to wake up to the smell of bread baking and Oliver's dinosaur lectures and you looking at me like I'm the best thing that ever happened to you. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. You and Oliver, you're everything. They spent the rest of the evening making plans, practical discussions about logistics and timing and where Claire's things would fit in the small apartment. She'd give up her lease at the end of the month. They'd need to make space in the closet, maybe convert the spare corner of the living room into a small office for her consulting work. All the mundane details that came with combining 2 lives into one. But underneath the practical talk was something deeper, excitement and joy, and the giddy disbelief that came with taking a leap and trusting you'd land somewhere soft. The next few weeks passed in a blur of change and adjustment. Claire's apartment got packed up, her expensive furniture sold or donated because it didn't fit in the modest space above the bakery. Her former colleagues called, some offering support, others making their disapproval clear. Her mother flew in from Chicago, took one look at the bakery and the apartment, and pulled Ethan aside for a conversation he'd been dreading. My daughter is giving up everything for you, Mrs. Morgan said, her voice cool and assessing. I hope you understand the magnitude of that choice. I do, ma'am. Every day. Do you love her? More than I thought it was possible to love anyone who wasn't my son. And if she regrets this decision, if she wakes up one day and realizes she's made a terrible mistake? Ethan met her eyes steadily. Then I'll help her fix it. I'll support whatever she needs, even if that means letting her go. But I don't think that's going to happen. Your daughter knows her own mind. She's not running away from something. She's running towards something, and I'm going to spend every day making sure she knows she made the right choice. Mrs. Morgan studied him for a long moment, then her expression softened slightly. Claire told me you make her happy, happier than she's been in years. I wasn't sure I believed her until I saw you together. The way you look at her, like she hung the moon. Every mother wants that for her daughter. I don't know about the moon, but she definitely lights up my world. That was terrible. Yeah, I'm not good with romantic metaphors. I'm better with bread. Mrs. Morgan actually laughed at that. Well, the bread is excellent. I'll give you that. And Oliver is delightful. So you have some things going for you. Just some things? Don't push your luck. You're dating my daughter after knowing her for 2 months and convinced her to quit her job and move in with you. You're not winning any conventional points here. No, ma'am, but I'm winning the only points that matter. By the time Mrs. Morgan left 3 days later, she'd warmed to Ethan considerably, won over by Oliver's earnest charm and the obvious devotion between her daughter and this unexpected baker who disrupted all of Claire's careful plans. Take care of her, she told Ethan at the airport, and let her take care of you too. That's the secret. It can't be one-sided. I will. I promise. Moving day arrived on a Saturday in late November, crisp and clear, with the kind of autumn weather that made the city feel alive. Claire's friends helped carry boxes up the narrow stairs to the apartment, asking pointed questions about Ethan's intentions and making sure Claire knew what she was getting into. But mostly they seemed happy for her, recognizing something in her face that hadn't been there before. Contentment, joy, peace. Oliver helped unpack, carefully arranging Claire's books on the shelf next to his dinosaur encyclopedias and insisting that Mr. Whiskers needed to approve of where everything went. By evening, the apartment had transformed. It was still small and cramped, but now it felt full in the best way, full of life and possibility and the combined histories of three people building something new together. That night, after Oliver was asleep and the boxes were mostly unpacked, Ethan and Claire stood at the window looking out at the city lights. Claire fit perfectly under his arm, her head resting on his shoulder, and Ethan thought about how much his life had changed in such a short time. "Do you regret it?" he asked quietly. "Giving up your old life for this one?" "No, not even a little bit. Do you regret letting me in?" "My only regret is that I wasted any time doubting this. Doubting us. We both needed time to be sure. There's no shame in that." "Are you sure now?" Claire tilted her head up to look at him, and in her eyes he saw nothing but certainty. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life. This, us, Oliver, the bakery, this ridiculous tiny apartment, this is exactly where I want to be. Even when Oliver wakes us up at 6 on a Sunday to tell us about his dream involving talking dinosaurs, especially then. Even when the bakery oven breaks and we can't afford to fix it right away. Even then. Ethan, I'm not here for the easy parts. I'm here for all of it. The chaos and the struggles and the beautiful, messy reality of building a life together. That's what I want. That's what I've always wanted. I just didn't know it until I met you." He kissed her then, deep and slow, pouring everything he couldn't quite find words for into the gesture. When they broke apart, Claire was smiling that smile that transformed her whole face. "I have something for you," she said, pulling away to dig through one of the unpacked boxes. She returned with a small wrapped package. "It's not much, but I saw it and thought of you." Ethan unwrapped it carefully to find a leather-bound journal, simple but beautiful, with blank pages waiting to be filled. "What's this for?" "I thought you could write down your recipes, the ones you've created, the ones you've modified from your father and grandfather. Build a record of everything you know so Oliver can have it one day. Your family's baking legacy, written in your own hand." Ethan turned the journal over in his hands, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "This is perfect. Thank you." There's an inscription on the first page. He opened it to see Claire's handwriting. "For Ethan, who taught me that the best things in life are made with patience, intention, and love. Thank you for letting me be part of your story." "Claire, I mean it. You've given me so much, a home, a family, a purpose. I wanted to give you something back. You being here is enough, more than enough." They stayed up late that night, talking about the future in concrete terms for the first time. Claire's consulting work was starting to pick up, bringing in steady income that took some pressure off the bakery. She had ideas for expanding their customer base, maybe adding a catering component for local businesses. Ethan admitted he'd been thinking about hosting baking classes on Sunday afternoons, teaching people the skills his father had taught him. "We could do it together," Claire suggested. "You teach the technique, I handle the business side, marketing, scheduling, customer management. Make it a real partnership." "You'd want to do that? Run baking classes with me?" "I want to do everything with you. Build this business, raise Oliver, figure out what comes next. All of it." As winter settled over the city, they fell into new routines. Early mornings in the bakery with Claire learning to judge dough by feel, not just by recipe. Afternoons with Oliver helping with homework and dinosaur projects. Evenings together as a family, cooking dinner and reading books and simply being present with each other. The outside voices didn't disappear entirely. Claire's former boss called to offer her a position at a different company, double her old salary. Old friends from business school questioned her choices, unable to understand why she'd trade a corner office for a bakery apron. But Claire fielded these inquiries with grace and growing confidence, each conversation reinforcing her certainty that she'd made the right choice. And slowly, imperceptibly, the life they were building together stopped feeling new and started feeling permanent. Claire's clothes mixed with Ethan's in the closet. Her coffee mug sat next to his on the shelf. Oliver started saying "we" instead of "Dad and I" when talking about family activities. The apartment that had once felt cramped now felt exactly the right size for the three of them. On Christmas morning, they woke to Oliver jumping on the bed, excited about presents and pancakes and the snow that had fallen overnight. As they sat around the small tree, Charlie Brown pathetic but perfect for their space, opening gifts, Ethan caught Claire's eye and saw his own happiness reflected back at him. This was it. This was the life he'd stopped believing he could have. And it was better than anything he'd imagined because it was real, imperfect and messy and absolutely right. Later that night, after Oliver was asleep, sugar crashed from too much candy and excitement, Ethan and Claire stood in the kitchen cleaning up the remnants of their Christmas dinner. The bakery below was dark and quiet, the city outside hushed under its blanket of snow. "Thank you," Ethan said. "For what?" "For taking a chance on this. On us. For walking into my bakery that morning and deciding to stay." Claire set down the dish she was washing and turned to face him, her hands dripping soapy water. "You know what the crazy thing is? I almost didn't come that day. I woke up and thought about just emailing you, making some excuse about being too busy. But something told me to go, to see you one more time, and that choice changed everything." "Best choice you ever made?" "Second best. The best choice was saying yes when you asked me to move in. That's when I knew for sure that this was real, that we were building something that would last." "It will last," Ethan said with certainty. "I'm going to make sure of it. We're going to make sure of it. Together." Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the city in white, making everything clean and new. Inside the small apartment above Brooks Family Bakery, three people who'd found each other against all odds slept peacefully, wrapped in warmth and certainty and the quiet knowledge that sometimes the best things in life came from the choices that scared you most. The wrong man had shown up to that blind date. The wrong woman had walked into that bakery. But somehow, impossibly, all those wrongs had added up to something more right than either of them could have planned. And in the morning, they'd wake up and do it all again. Make bread, help with homework, build a life one small choice at a time. Not perfect, but theirs. Not easy, but worth it. Always worth it. Spring arrived with the kind of gentle insistence that made you believe in new beginnings. The snow melted, revealing sidewalks and streets that had been hidden for months, and the city seemed to shake off winter like a dog shaking off water. In the bakery, Ethan adjusted his recipes for the changing season. Lighter pastries, fruit tarts using the first strawberries from the farmer's market, lemon scones that tasted like sunshine. Claire had been living with them for 4 months now, and the transition had been smoother than either of them had dared hope. She'd found her rhythm in the bakery, taking over the business operations that Ethan had always neglected, updating their ancient point-of-sale system, creating a real social media presence, reaching out to local businesses about catering contracts. Her consulting work provided steady income, but increasingly she spent her energy on the bakery, treating it like the project she'd been waiting her whole career to tackle. "We need to talk about expansion," she said one morning in late March, spreading spreadsheets across the kitchen table while Ethan made breakfast. "Expansion?" Ethan cracked eggs into a bowl, eyeing the numbers she was showing him. "We can barely handle the customers we have now." "Exactly. Look at these sales figures from the past 3 months. We're up 30% from the same period last year. People are waiting in line during the morning rush. We're selling out of croissants by 9 a.m. That's not sustainable. So we make more croissants. Or we hire help, real help, not just you working yourself to exhaustion every morning. We could bring in a part-time baker for the early shift, someone to handle production while you focus on quality and new recipes. And I've been thinking about the space next door, the print shop that closed last month. The landlord might be willing to negotiate a good rate if we wanted to expand." Ethan set down the whisk, turning to look at her properly. "You're serious about this?" "Why wouldn't I be? This bakery has so much potential, Ethan. You're incredibly talented, but you're trying to do everything yourself. With the right support, we could turn this into something really special." "My father ran this place for 30 years without expanding." "I know, and I respect that. But times change. The neighborhood is changing. We can either adapt or slowly fade away. I'm not trying to turn this into some corporate operation. I'm trying to help you build something sustainable. Something Oliver can inherit if he wants to, that isn't a crushing burden of 18-hour days and constant financial stress." Oliver wandered into the kitchen, still in his pajamas, Mr. Whiskers dragging on the floor behind him. "Are we getting bigger, like when dinosaurs evolved into birds?" "Not quite like that, buddy," Ethan said. Claire thinks we should hire someone to help at the bakery. That sounds good. Then maybe you could come to my field trip next month. All the other kids have parents coming, and I said you'd come, but then you said you couldn't because of work. The words landed like a punch to Ethan's gut. He'd been so focused on keeping the bakery running, on providing for Oliver, that he'd been missing the things that actually mattered. Field trips, school performances, the ordinary moments of childhood that passed too quickly. I'll come to your field trip, Ethan said. I promise. But what about the bakery? Claire's right. We'll figure it out. We'll find help. Oliver's face lit up with a smile that made every sacrifice worthwhile. Really? You promise for real? For real. After Oliver went to get dressed for school, Ethan sat down at the table across from Claire. Okay, tell me your plan. Her eyes widened with surprise. Just like that? You're on board? My kid thinks I'm too busy for him. That's not the kind of father I want to be. So yeah, I'm on board. Show me what you're thinking. They spent the next hour going through Claire's proposals. She'd done extensive research, comparable bakery wages in the area, projected costs for expansion, potential revenue from catering contracts she'd already lined up. It was thorough and professional and exactly the kind of business planning Ethan had always avoided because it felt too corporate, too far from the simple craft of baking. This is impressive, he admitted. When did you have time to put all this together? Late nights after you fall asleep, I told you I wanted to be useful. This is how I can help, taking the business burden off your shoulders so you can focus on what you're actually good at. I'm good at business. I've kept this place running for 3 years. You've kept it barely afloat for 3 years. There's a difference. Ethan, you're an incredible baker. You have instincts and skills that can't be taught. But running a business requires different skills, and there's no shame in admitting that's not your strength. Let me do this part. Let me help you build something that doesn't require you to sacrifice everything else in your life. He reached across the table and took her hand. What did I do to deserve you? You showed up to a blind date meant for your brother and were honest enough to tell me the truth. Everything else followed from that. They put Claire's plan into action gradually. First, they posted an ad for a part-time baker, and after interviewing 7 candidates, they hired Marcus, a recent culinary school graduate with enthusiasm and skill, but no ego about learning from Ethan's unorthodox techniques. Having Marcus handle the early morning production meant Ethan could sleep past 4 a.m. for the first time in years, could focus on developing new recipes and training, rather than simply executing the same tasks day after day. The difference was immediate and profound. Ethan had energy he'd forgotten he could have. He attended Oliver's field trip to the Natural History Museum, chaperoned a group of 6-year-olds through exhibits on prehistoric life, and felt present in his son's life in a way he hadn't managed since taking over the bakery. Dad was here the whole time, Oliver told Claire that evening, his voice filled with pride. He didn't even check his phone once. That's because I knew Marcus had everything under control, Ethan said, and because I wouldn't miss seeing you explain to the museum guide why she was wrong about velociraptors. She said they were 6 feet tall, but they were only about 3 feet tall. I had to tell her. Claire laughed, pulling Oliver into a hug. Of course you did. Someone has to keep museum guides honest. The expansion into the adjacent space took longer to negotiate, but by late spring they'd signed a lease and started renovating. Claire managed the contractors while Ethan handled the bakery, and slowly the print shop transformed into additional seating and a small event space they could rent out for private parties or use for the baking classes they'd been planning. Daniel showed up unannounced one Saturday in May, walking into the bakery during the lunch rush and standing awkwardly by the door until Ethan noticed him. "This is new," Daniel said, gesturing to the expanded space, the customers filling every table, the line at the counter. "Business is good," Ethan said carefully. They hadn't spoken much since their conversation months ago, occasional texts but nothing substantial. "Can we talk? I won't take long." They stepped outside into the spring sunshine, and Daniel shoved his hands in his pockets, looking uncomfortable in a way Ethan had rarely seen from his always confident brother. "I quit my job," Daniel said abruptly. "What?" 3 weeks ago. I put in my notice and walked away from the partnership track and the corner office and all of it. Ethan stared at his brother, searching for signs this was a joke. "Why?" "Because I was miserable. Because I was working 80 hours a week for something I didn't even want. Because I kept thinking about what you said, about having purpose and making something that matters. And I realized I had neither. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. I'm going back to school, architecture. It's what I wanted to do before Dad got sick, and I felt like I had to be the successful one, make enough money for both of us. Dad would have wanted you to do what made you happy. I know that now. Took me long enough to figure it out. Daniel looked at the bakery, at the people visible through the windows. You were right, Ethan. You have something real here. Something worth protecting. I was jealous of that, and I took it out on you and Claire. I'm sorry. You already apologized. I'm apologizing again, and I'm asking if maybe we could start over. Be actual brothers instead of whatever we've been for the past few years. Ethan considered his brother, really looked at him, and saw someone who looked lighter somehow, unburdened in a way he hadn't been in years. Yeah, I'd like that. They hugged, awkward and brief but genuine, and when they pulled apart, Daniel was smiling. Mom's going to lose her mind when I tell her I'm going back to school at 35. She'll be thrilled. She's been worried about you. She worries about everyone. It's her default state. Daniel glanced through the window again. Is that Claire? She looks different than I expected. You expected someone in a business suit? Something like that. She fits here, with you and this place. I can see why she chose it. She chose me, Ethan corrected. The bakery came with the package. No, she chose all of it, the whole life. That's even better. After Daniel left, promising to come by for Sunday dinner soon, Ethan stood outside his bakery and took stock of his life. The spring sun was warm on his face. Through the window, he could see Claire laughing at something Marcus said while she rang up a customer. Upstairs, Oliver was at a play date, having the kind of normal childhood experiences Ethan had worried he'd never be able to provide. Everything had changed in 6 months. Everything except the bread, which still came out of the oven every morning smelling like home. The baking classes started in June, Sunday afternoons when the bakery was closed to regular customers. They'd planned for maybe 6 or 8 students, but Claire's marketing brought in 15 for the first session, a mix of young professionals and retirees, people who wanted to learn a skill or just spend an afternoon doing something with their hands. Ethan taught while Claire managed the logistics, and Oliver appointed himself assistant instructor, demonstrating proper hand-washing technique and explaining the science of yeast with the enthusiasm only a 7-year-old could muster. The yeast eats the sugar and burps out carbon dioxide, Oliver told a bemused accountant trying to knead dough. That's what makes the bread rise, yeast burps. That's technically correct, Ethan confirmed. Maybe we could use the word produces instead of burps, though. But burps is more fun to say. The classes were successful enough that they added a second session, then a third. People came back week after week, not just for the baking, but for the community they found there. The bakery became a gathering place, somewhere people could learn and laugh and create something with their hands in a world that increasingly felt disconnected and virtual. One evening in late June, after a particularly chaotic class where someone had accidentally added salt instead of sugar to their dough, Ethan and Claire sat in the empty bakery sharing a bottle of wine and a loaf of olive bread. We should probably go upstairs, Claire said, though neither of them moved. Oliver will be wondering where we are. He's building a Lego dinosaur. He won't notice we're gone for another hour at least. How do you know? Because he told me it has 347 pieces, and he's only on step 12 of 38. We have time. Claire laughed and leaned her head on his shoulder. I love our life. Yeah? Yeah. I know that probably sounds sappy, but I do. I love waking up to the smell of bread. I love teaching classes with you. I love watching Oliver grow up and having dinner together every night, and all the ordinary things I used to think were boring. Turns out ordinary is actually pretty wonderful when you're doing it with the right people. Ethan kissed the top of her head. I have something to ask you. That sounds ominous. It's not ominous, it's just... He took a deep breath, suddenly nervous in a way he hadn't been since the first time he'd asked her to move in. I want to make this permanent. Legal. I want to marry you. Claire sat up, her eyes wide. Are you proposing? I'm doing a terrible job of it, but yes, I don't have a ring yet because I wanted to ask first. Make sure you'd want that before I went and spent money on something you might not. She kissed him, cutting off his rambling explanation. When they broke apart, she was crying and laughing at the same time. Yes. Obviously, yes. Did you really think I might say no? I don't know. It seemed presumptuous to assume. We've only been together for 8 months. Ethan Brooks, I quit my job and moved in with you after 6 weeks. I think we're past worrying about moving too fast. So that's a yes? That's a yes. 1,000 times yes. They sat there grinning at each other like fools until Ethan remembered something. We should probably tell Oliver. Get his blessing, officially. You think he'll be okay with it? Are you kidding? He's been asking me when you were going to be his real mom since Christmas. I keep telling him you already are his real mom in all the ways that matter, but he wants the official designation. They went upstairs to find Oliver exactly where Ethan had predicted, surrounded by Lego pieces, his tongue sticking out in concentration as he followed the instruction manual. Oliver, we need to talk to you about something, Ethan said. Oliver looked up, immediately worried. Did I do something wrong? No, buddy, nothing wrong. We just wanted to ask you something important. How would you feel if Claire and I got married? Oliver's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Confusion, understanding, then pure joy. Really? You're getting married? If you're okay with it. Are you kidding? That's the best thing ever. Does this mean Claire will be my mom? Like officially? Claire crouched down to Oliver's level, her eyes shining with tears. I would be honored to be your mom, officially, if that's what you want. It's what I want. I've wanted it forever. Oliver threw his arms around Claire's neck, nearly knocking her over. Can I be in the wedding? And can Mr. Whiskers be in the wedding too? You can both be in the wedding, Ethan promised. We wouldn't have it without you. They spent the rest of the evening planning an imaginary wedding that involved dinosaurs and Legos and way too much cake. And when Oliver finally went to bed, still buzzing with excitement, Ethan and Claire stood in his doorway watching him sleep. He's going to tell everyone at school tomorrow, Claire whispered, probably before the opening bell even rings. Are you okay with that? With how fast this is all happening? Ethan pulled her close. I've never been more okay with anything in my life. When you know, you know. And I know. They were married in September, a small ceremony in the bakery they'd built together. The tables were pushed aside to create space for 30 chairs. Flowers from the farmer's market decorated every surface, and the smell of fresh bread, because Ethan couldn't not bake on his wedding day, filled the air. Oliver walked Claire down the makeshift aisle, his small hand in hers, both of them grinning so wide it looked like it hurt. He wore a suit that was slightly too big and carried Mr. Whiskers, who'd been dressed in a tiny bow tie for the occasion. Ethan stood at the front, flanked by Marcus and Daniel, and watched the woman he loved walk toward him. She wore a simple white dress, no veil, her hair down the way he liked it, and she'd never looked more beautiful. The ceremony was short and sweet, officiated by a friend of Ethan's mother, who kept making jokes about bread and rising to the occasion until Claire laughed so hard she cried. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves, promises about early mornings and dinosaur lectures and choosing each other every day, even when things got hard. When the officiant pronounced them married, Oliver cheered so loudly that everyone laughed, and Ethan kissed his wife for the first time to applause, and the clinking of glasses filled with champagne and sparkling cider. The reception was potluck, everyone bringing dishes to share, and they danced in the bakery until late into the night. Oliver fell asleep on a pile of coats in the corner, Mr. Whiskers clutched in his arms, a smile on his face even in sleep. This is perfect, Claire said, swaying with Ethan to music playing from someone's phone. Everything about this day is perfect. Even the part where Oliver knocked over the champagne tower? Especially that part. It wouldn't be our wedding without something going chaotically wrong. Ethan's mother approached them, slightly tipsy on champagne, and pulled them both into a hug. I'm sorry I doubted you, both of you. This is exactly what love should look like. Messy and imperfect and absolutely right. Thanks, Mom. And Claire, welcome to the family, officially. Though you've been family since the day you walked into this bakery and decided to stay. Daniel gave a toast that was surprisingly heartfelt, thanking Ethan for showing him that success didn't have to look like a corner office, and thanking Claire for making his brother happier than he'd ever seen him. Even Mrs. Morgan, who'd flown in from Chicago, admitted that while she'd had different dreams for her daughter's life, watching Claire glow with happiness made it impossible to argue with her choices. As the night wound down and guests began to leave, Ethan and Claire stood in the doorway of the bakery, saying goodbye and thank you, and we love you to everyone who'd come to celebrate with them. When the last guest had gone and Marcus had offered to clean up, they carried sleeping Oliver upstairs and tucked him into bed. "We should probably go to sleep too," Claire said. "Tomorrow's Monday. Back to the regular schedule." "In a minute. First, I want to do something." Ethan led her to the kitchen table where the leather journal Claire had given him months ago sat filled now with recipes and notes and observations. He flipped to a blank page near the back and wrote the date. Then, "Today I married the woman who changed everything. This bakery, this life, this family we've built, none of it would exist without her. If Oliver ever reads this, I want him to know that love doesn't always look like the stories say it should. Sometimes it looks like a wrong person showing up to the right meeting. Sometimes it looks like courage and choice and deciding to build something new instead of settling for what's expected. And sometimes it's as simple as a woman walking into a bakery and staying for coffee." Claire read over his shoulder, her arms wrapped around him from behind, and Ethan felt her tears drop onto his shoulder. "That's beautiful. It's true. You changed everything, Claire. Before you, I was surviving. Now I'm living. We're living together." They stood there in the quiet kitchen, the city settling into sleep outside their windows, and Ethan thought about the journey that had brought them here. A blind date that never happened, a favor for his mother that changed his life. All the small choices that had added up to this moment: married, happy, home. The months that followed settled into a comfortable rhythm. The bakery continued to thrive, their reputation spreading through the neighborhood and beyond. They hired another part-time employee to handle the weekend rush, giving them actual days off together. Oliver thrived in school, his confidence growing with the security of having two parents who showed up for him, who made time for field trips and parent-teacher conferences and the mundane moments of childhood. Claire's consulting business evolved into something new. She started helping other small businesses with strategic planning, using the experience she'd gained transforming the bakery. But she always kept her mornings free for the bakery, for the routine they'd built together, for the life they'd chosen. One Sunday morning in December, almost exactly a year after Claire had first walked into Brooks Family Bakery, Ethan woke to find his wife and son in the kitchen making pancakes. Oliver was carefully measuring flour while Claire read the recipe from her phone, both of them covered in batter and laughing about something. "What's all this?" Ethan asked from the doorway. "We're making breakfast," Oliver announced. "Claire's teaching me her secret pancake recipe." "I didn't know you had a secret pancake recipe." "I don't, but Oliver seemed very convinced I did, so we're inventing one as we go." Ethan poured himself coffee and sat at the table, content to watch them work. This was everything he'd ever wanted and more than he'd ever dared to hope for. Not perfection, the pancakes were definitely going to be lumpy, and Oliver had gotten batter on Mr. Whiskers, and the kitchen was a disaster. But real and warm, and theirs. "Dad," Oliver said, flipping a pancake with intense concentration, "do you remember when you went to meet Uncle Daniel's girlfriend, but you met Claire instead?" "I remember. That was the best mistake ever." Ethan met Claire's eyes across the kitchen, saw his own happiness reflected there. "Yeah, buddy, it really was." Later that afternoon, they went for a walk through the neighborhood, the three of them plus Mr. Whiskers, who Oliver insisted needed fresh air. The December weather was cold but clear, the kind of crisp winter day that made everything feel sharp and new. They passed the cafe where Ethan had first met Claire, and on impulse, he pulled them inside. "Why are we stopping?" Oliver asked. "I want to show Claire something. See that table in the corner? That's where your dad and I met. I was supposed to meet your Uncle Daniel, but your dad came instead." "And you fell in love right away?" Claire laughed. "Not quite right away, but I knew there was something special about him. About the way he was honest with me, even when it would have been easier to lie. About how much he loved you, even though I hadn't met you yet. I knew he was someone worth getting to know. And now you're married, and we're a family." "Now we're a family," Claire confirmed. They ordered hot chocolate and sat at that same corner table, Oliver chattering about his upcoming holiday concert at school, while Ethan and Claire listened with half their attention, their hands linked across the table the same way they'd been that first afternoon. "Do you ever think about how different things would be if Daniel hadn't been sick that day?" Claire asked quietly while Oliver was distracted by the pastry case. "All the time. And then I stopped thinking about it because it doesn't matter. We found each other. That's what counts." "We found each other," Claire agreed, "and we chose each other. Every day we keep choosing each other." "Every day," Ethan confirmed. That night, after Oliver was asleep and the bakery was prepped for Monday morning, Ethan and Claire stood at their usual spot by the window, looking out at the city lights. The neighborhood had changed in the years since Claire had entered their lives. New shops opening, old ones closing, the constant evolution of urban life. But the bakery remained, solid and steady, a constant in a changing world. "I have something to tell you," Claire said, her voice nervous in a way that made Ethan's heart skip. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. At least, I don't think it's wrong. I hope it's not wrong." She took a deep breath. "I'm pregnant." Ethan's mind went blank for a moment, trying to process the information. Then joy, pure, uncomplicated joy, flooded through him. "You're pregnant? We're having a baby?" "We're having a baby. I found out yesterday, but I wanted to be sure before I told you, so I went to the doctor this morning while you were teaching the baking class. About 8 weeks along, they think, due in July." Ethan pulled her into his arms, holding her tight, feeling tears stream down his face. "A baby. We're having a baby. Are you happy? I know we didn't plan this, and Oliver's 7, and things are finally stable with the bakery. I'm happy. I'm so happy I can't even find words for it. Are you happy?" "Terrified and happy. Mostly happy." They stood there holding each other while the city hummed around them, and Ethan thought about the family they'd built and the family they were still building, Oliver sleeping peacefully in his room, the baby growing inside Claire, the life they'd created from nothing but courage and choice and the willingness to believe in something unlikely. "We should probably tell Oliver soon," Claire said, "before I start showing and he figures it out on his own. Tomorrow. We'll tell him tomorrow." But Oliver, with the uncanny perception children sometimes had, knew something was different the moment they sat him down the next morning. "Are we getting a dog?" he asked hopefully. "No, buddy. Something even better. You're going to be a big brother." Oliver's eyes went wide. "Really? There's a baby?" "There's going to be a baby," Claire confirmed, "in about 7 months. What do you think about that?" "I think that's awesome. Can I teach them about dinosaurs?" "You can absolutely teach them about dinosaurs." "And will they live here with us? In our family?" "They'll live here with us. They'll be part of our family from the very beginning." Oliver thought about this for a moment, his face serious. Then he smiled, that gap-toothed grin that never failed to make Ethan's heart swell. "Good. Because our family is the best family, and the baby is lucky to be in it." "We're all lucky," Ethan said, pulling his son into a hug. "Every single one of us." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through winter and into spring. Claire worked until her 6th month, then transitioned to fully remote consulting, taking calls from the apartment while helping with the bakery during slower hours. Her body changed, growing round with their child, and Ethan found himself constantly amazed by the miracle of it. Life growing, a family expanding, all the ordinary magic that happened when two people chose to build something together. Oliver appointed himself Claire's personal assistant, bringing her water and snacks and telling the baby stories through her belly about school and dinosaurs and what it was like living above a bakery. "You're going to love it here," Oliver told Claire's stomach one evening. "We have the best bread in the whole city, and Dad makes these croissants that are so good they're basically magic. And Claire, Mom, she makes everything better just by being here. Plus, we have Mr. Whiskers, and he's going to teach you all the important stuff." In May, they learned they were having a girl. Oliver immediately started planning all the things he'd teach his little sister, from the proper pronunciation of Tyrannosaurus rex to the best way to fold croissant dough. Daniel came by regularly now, sometimes to help in the bakery, sometimes just to visit. He'd started his architecture program and was happier than Ethan had ever seen him, talking enthusiastically about design principles and sustainable building practices. "You're glowing," Daniel told Claire one afternoon. "Pregnancy suits you." "Pregnancy makes me exhausted and my feet hurt and I can't eat half the things I normally love. But yeah, I'm happy." "You should be. You're building something real here, all of you." Daniel looked around the bakery, at the customers filling the tables, at Oliver doing homework in the corner while eating a chocolate croissant. "I used to think success meant money and titles and corner offices. But watching you guys, I realized success actually looks like this: purpose and family and work that matters. You figured that out way before I did." On a warm evening in mid-July, 2 weeks before her due date, Claire's water broke while they were closing up the bakery. Ethan's mother, who'd been visiting for the week in preparation for the birth, took Oliver home with her while Ethan and Claire headed to the hospital. "I'm scared," Claire admitted in the car. "Me too. But we're doing this together, just like everything else." Labor was long and difficult, 16 hours that tested both of them. But when their daughter finally arrived, small and perfect and screaming with indignation at being forced into the world, every moment of pain dissolved into pure joy. "She's beautiful," Ethan whispered, watching Claire hold their daughter for the first time. "She looks like you. Same dark hair, same serious expression." "She looks like us, like our family." They named her Sarah after Ethan's grandmother, the woman who'd first run the bakery and whose legacy they were continuing. When Oliver came to meet his sister the next day, he approached the hospital bassinet with the careful reverence usually reserved for dinosaur fossils. "She's so small," he whispered. "You were this small once," Claire told him. "Really? That's crazy." Oliver gently touched Sarah's tiny hand, and when her fingers closed around his face lit up with wonder. "Hi, Sarah. I'm your big brother. I'm going to teach you everything I know, and I know a lot about dinosaurs and bread and how to be part of the best family in the world." Ethan stood with his arm around Claire, watching his children together, and felt something settle in his chest. This was it. This was everything he'd ever wanted and more than he'd ever imagined possible. Not the life he'd planned, but the life he'd built, one choice at a time, one day at a time, with people he loved. They brought Sarah home 3 days later to a bakery decorated with balloons and a banner Oliver had made that said, "Welcome home, baby sister," in careful 7-year-old handwriting. The apartment that had once felt cramped now felt perfectly full. 2 adults, 2 children, 1 stuffed rabbit, and all the love they could hold. The first few weeks were chaotic. Sarah cried at night, Oliver was jealous and then fiercely protective. The bakery still needed to run, and everyone was exhausted. But they figured it out together, trading off baby duty, learning Sarah's rhythms, finding a new normal that included all 4 of them. One quiet morning in August, Ethan was up early with Sarah, giving Claire a chance to sleep in while Oliver was at a friend's house. He carried his daughter down to the bakery kitchen, holding her against his chest while he started the sourdough. "Someday," he told her, "I'm going to teach you how to make bread, just like my father taught me and his father taught him. It's about patience and intention and understanding that good things take time. You can't rush bread. It rises when it's ready, not when you want it to." Sarah made a small noise that might have been agreement or might have been gas, and Ethan smiled. "Your mom would say I'm being overly philosophical about bread again. She's probably right. But here's what I really want you to know." He paused, gathering his thoughts while his hands continued their familiar work. "Love is a choice. It's not something that just happens to you. It's something you decide to do, every single day. I chose your mom, and she chose me, and we chose this life together. And we chose you and your brother, chose to build this family, and this business, and this ordinary, extraordinary life." He looked around the kitchen. The same equipment his grandfather had used, the same recipes passed down through generations, but also new things, changes Claire had helped implement, improvements they'd made together. "Nothing about this was inevitable," he continued. "Your mom could have stayed in her corporate job. I could have kept running this place alone, too stubborn to accept help. We could have let fear and doubt and everyone else's opinions keep us apart. But we didn't. We chose each other. We chose this." Sarah had fallen asleep against his chest, her breathing soft and even, and Ethan felt a wave of love so intense it made his chest ache. This tiny person, this new life they'd created. She was the physical manifestation of everything they'd built together. When Claire came downstairs an hour later, she found Ethan at the table with Sarah in one arm and the leather journal open in front of him, writing one-handed. "What are you writing?" "Just recording today. For the kids. For later. So they know the story of how we became a family." Claire read over his shoulder. "Today I held our daughter in the bakery for the first time and told her about choice and love and the life her mother and I built together. I told her about a blind date that never happened and a woman brave enough to walk into my bakery and stay. I told her that sometimes the best things in life come from happy accidents and courage and the willingness to believe in something unlikely." "That's beautiful," Claire said, tears in her eyes. "It's true." Ethan closed the journal and pulled Claire into his free arm, the three of them wrapped together in the quiet morning. Every word of it. Autumn came again, marking 2 years since Ethan had first walked into that cafe to meet a woman meant for his brother. The bakery was thriving now, truly successful in ways Ethan had never dared to dream. They'd hired 2 more employees, expanded the catering business, even gotten written up in a local food magazine as one of the neighborhood's hidden gems. But the real success wasn't measured in revenue or reviews. It was measured in mornings like this one, late September, crisp and clear. Oliver was helping Marcus in the kitchen, learning advanced techniques and asking endless questions. Sarah was in a carrier on Claire's chest while she handled the morning customers, cooing and occasionally grabbing at the pastries when people leaned too close. Ethan moved between the kitchen and the counter, overseeing everything but no longer trying to do everything himself. This was what success looked like. A family working together. A business that sustained them but didn't consume them. Time for field trips and baking classes and lazy Sunday mornings when they could sleep past 5 a.m. That evening, after the bakery closed and the kids were in bed, Ethan and Claire found themselves back at that cafe where it all began. They'd made it a tradition, visiting once a year on the anniversary of their first meeting, ordering coffee and sitting at the same corner table. 2 years, Claire said, wrapping her hands around her cup. Can you believe it? Some days it feels like yesterday. Other days it feels like you've always been part of my life. I can barely remember what my life was like before. All those meetings and presentations and striving for something I didn't actually want. It feels like a different person's life. Do you miss it? Ever? Sometimes I miss the simplicity of it. Everything was clear. Work hard. Get promoted. Repeat. No messy emotions or complicated relationships. But I don't miss the emptiness. I don't miss going to bed every night wondering if this was all there was. She reached across the table and took his hand. I'd rather have messy and complicated with you than simple and empty alone. Even when Sarah's up every 2 hours and Oliver's going through a phase where he only wants to eat dinosaur-shaped foods and the espresso machine breaks during the morning rush? Especially then. Those are the moments that make it real. The chaos and the challenges and the everyday problems we solve together. That's what makes a life. Not the highlight reel, but the ordinary moments in between. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the cafe around them, the same place where everything had started. A young couple sat near the door, clearly on a first date, nervous and hopeful. An elderly man read his newspaper in the corner. Life continued its patterns, people meeting and partying and finding their way to each other in 1,000 different ways. Do you think we would have found each other eventually? Claire asked. If that blind date hadn't happened, if your brother hadn't been sick, if your mom hadn't asked you to go? I don't know. Maybe. But I'm glad we didn't have to wait. I'm glad you walked into my bakery when you did. Best decision I ever made. Second best, Ethan corrected. The best was saying yes when I asked you to move in. No, the best was saying yes when you proposed. Wait, no, the best was deciding to have Sarah. Actually, I can't decide. They're all tied for best decision. Then we're lucky. Most people don't get one best decision in their life. We got a whole series of them. They finished their coffee and walked home through the autumn evening, hand in hand, talking about everything and nothing. The bakery was dark when they passed it, but Ethan could see the work they'd done, the expanded space, the new sign, the successful business they'd built together. But more important than any of that was what waited upstairs. Oliver asleep with his newest dinosaur encyclopedia. Sarah in her crib, tiny fists curled against her cheeks. The life they'd created. That night, after checking on both kids and getting ready for bed, Ethan made one final entry in the leather journal. 2 years ago today, I walked into a cafe to deliver bad news and walked out with hope. I didn't know it then. Couldn't have known what that one conversation would lead to. But Claire saw something in me, something I'd stopped seeing in myself. She saw possibility and potential, and a life worth building. She walked into my bakery and stayed. And in staying, she transformed everything. This journal started as a record of recipes, a legacy to pass down to Oliver. But it's become something more, a chronicle of how we became a family, how we built something real from nothing but courage and choice. If my children ever read this, I want them to know love is worth the risk, change is worth the fear, and sometimes the wrong person showing up is exactly right. Claire read it over his shoulder and kissed the top of his head. You know what we should do? What? Start a new journal. One for Sarah, like this one's for Oliver. Record her recipes, her milestones, the story of how she came into this family. And we fill it with the same things? Recipes and stories and all the ordinary magic of building a life together? Exactly. So when she's older, when both of them are older, they'll have a record of how this all happened. How a single father and a corporate executive found each other against all odds and built something that mattered. Ethan pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo, feeling the steady beat of her heart against his chest. I love you. I know I don't say it enough, but I do. I love you more than I knew it was possible to love someone. I love you too. And you say it plenty. You say it every morning when you make my coffee. Every time you handle a problem so I don't have to worry about it. Every time you look at our children like they hung the moon. You say it in 1,000 ways every day. They climbed into bed, exhausted and happy, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring. Through the window, the city lights glittered like stars, and somewhere in the apartment, Sarah made a small sound in her sleep. This was their life now, chaos and joy and love and bread and all the ordinary, extraordinary moments that made a family. The wrong man had shown up to that blind date. The wrong woman had walked into that bakery, but somehow, impossibly, all those wrongs had added up to something absolutely right. And in the morning, they'd wake up and do it all again. Make bread, help with homework, navigate the beautiful mess of family life, one choice at a time, one day at a time, together, always together.